I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looks like you've been to Hawaii.
Hey,
Really saying.
well, it's not me sometimes, but I'm not in hospitals, I can go outside and work. They say that's the only way I get my muscle mass back is to just work.
All right.
Okay, let's go ahead and do roll call. There'll be Lenny.
Lenny Baker.
Here.
Ken Marcy,
Here,
Scott Smiley. Chris Alpine,
Here, haven't seen him yet.
Randy Kaiser.
Randy won't be here.
We do have forum.
Okay. And I think Scott's gonna be here, but I don't know. Doesn't show up. He'll probably pop up on Zoom. Okay, we'll go ahead and when he gets here, we'll just proceed. Approve of the agenda. Get a motion.
second.
Any discussions? All in favor? Aye. Agenda is approved. Old business. A, we called the meeting for today. Yes,
Says next comments, questions from community audience members.
yes,
Yes.
let's go ahead and do that. Now you can,
I'm sorry. I just happened to notice that you had a meeting today. And I want to compliment the roads. You've been working on them like crazy. I'm at 220 El Camino Real, which is the house that's on stilts. And the curve below me gets a lot of washboard and the curve above me gets a lot of washboard. So this summer, a lot of dirt has been put on the road all the way from the curve below my house to the curve above my house. And the problem is that now it's very hard to get into my driveway because the road has built up so much. When I bought my house in 1992, the driveway was straight with the road.
right,
So, I think that if the road were taken down, a foot from like halfway between the curb and my house to below the curb above my house, that I could get in and out of my driveway much more easily and it wouldn't be quite as much. And if that dirt were removed, it could be used somewhere else because it's all DOT fill. You know, that whole height
right.
has been put on there. And I'm still getting in and out of my driveway, but I have some friends that have pickup trucks, big pickup trucks, and they're scraping bottom when they come into my driveway. So it's reached the point where something needs to be done somehow.
Probably the procedure that we would need to take is we can get Kurt Hepler to come out and look at it and do a size up and come up with a solution on how we can take care of it. But by just looking at that one picture, it's hard for us to say that, yeah, we can come and do this because it's really not kind of in our department to do that. But we can pass that on to Kurt. And then Kurt will be the one that has to look at it and kind of do an estimate on what we need to do for your satisfaction.
Okay, right now I can't go into the road on my feet because of my knee and the crutches.
Okay,
It's at an angle that's pretty steep and it's all rock. So it's like ball bearings. usually I go onto the road for my car, but sometimes I go onto the road for my dog. So, it's a quality of life issue for me.
We see the urgency, but for us to go through the proper channels, it would have to go through Kurt. And he would have to look at it, and he would have to make the decisions on what we can do and how quick we can do it.
Okay,
Because we will do everything in our power to get this taken care of. I see by your picture what it is. When they put that new base in, they brought in that much height and base.
well, over the years,
Yes.
it's been getting higher and higher.
Building up.
And so it's to the point that people are dragging when they
And
come in.
we'll just, like I say, Kurt will have to look at it and he can look at it and make a decision. He may be able to lower that section in front of your house and kind of.
I think
keep
it can be
blended
done
together.
without making the road
Right,
weird.
because they can't pull all that base off because that would just be totally unpractical. But maybe there in front of your house that he may be able to taper it down and make it.
The
Easy.
person that's doing the road scraper is trying very hard not to make a dike in front of my house.
Right.
But, and I appreciate his efforts
Okay.
very much. Thank you.
We've,
Your house number, Barbara?
220 El Camino Real.
Got it.
Thank you.
and we will pass that on to Kurt and we'll try to get this taken care of real properly.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Doug. Any other questions? That, I think that's about what we can do, because our hands are kind of tied as a committee for that. Where we will get that to Kurt, and he'll be the one who'll have to take that next step.
Okay, well, I just happened to see that it was roads and infrastructure today, and I can go.
And this is just kind of a special meeting, because we're have to deal with some title approval stuff. But, we appreciate you coming in and letting us know your concerns, and we'll do what we can to get it taken care of.
Thank you much.
Okay, old business. Let's go to A. What we're really here for is to go through this Title VII, and we had it set up to where we were only go a certain portion of it. And I think, Santos can probably help us a lot with it because you are it. Yeah.
I'm just facilitating. Don't give me too much more credit than that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Councilman Ralph. What we tasked with last week is just look at some priority sections of Title VII. So 1, 2, 5, and section 10 with relation to water conservation. And so on the direction of the committee, we put the whole chapter related to them. And then we highlighted sections that we were either recommending deletions or additions in yellow, and we also put it in purple ink as well. And so you'll see that, like page 11 is where we had some language added. The village clerk's office has noted that in the definitions, anything that starts with a number should be at the start of the definition section. And so there's one part where it references 100-year flood after the letter N. So, or the 50-year flood. So the recommendation on that is just move those that start with a number, put them all at the front. So it's uniform with other sections in the code. So that's the reason why you see that in the definitions. But let me go to some of the new definitions. You go to page 3. And chapter 1 is the standalone by itself because it's a substantial chapter. Talking to Kurt, he had recommended adding some language that is currently not in the code. And you'll see on page 3, that's the first definition of a connecting driveway. You've seen this, it's kind of like the half moon drive that you see on some properties, or the C drive, where it's the same lot, but it's got one entrance, one exit. That hadn't really been defined in our ordinance, so that's what was recommended.
So you should probably define it that way, because this this definition is a little bit ambiguous.
What did you want me to add?
So just the way that you just,
Like e.g. circular drive or,
yeah, circular drive or drive that connects one side of the property to, I mean, it could be a driveway that goes all the way across the property, right?
yeah,
So a driveway that only has one entrance exit, like a normal driveway, technically still meets this definition. So the fact that it basically has two encroachments instead of one, I think.
Right, there you go, two encroachments, I think.
2 encroachments. Okay, I can add that.
If they can go up and do a circle in their property and come out the same driveway, it's
Got you.
like I said, it's that.
I like the idea of adding with 2 points of egress.
Yeah.
2 encroachments, with 2 encroachments. That makes sense. Page 7, 50-year design storm. That's just so that we can move it to the front. Page 9, it's the same 100-year design storm, move that to the front.
So where did you get the definitions of these design storms?
Those were already there, so we're not asking to change those. We just highlighted them because that's been recommended to move them to the front of the definition section because it starts with a number. So I just wanted to highlight that we aren't changing any of the text. We're just moving it to the front. That's why there's not an underline on it or a strike through.
Just changing the order that it's in.
That's correct. We're just moving up to the front. The next definition on page 11, you'll see the 10-year, the 25-year storm. Again, that's just moving to the front, but the one above it, substantial completion. Kirk felt it was important to have that there's a reference to just how many site inspections clears substantial.
I have a issue with that.
Okay,
Substantial completion to me has always been a contract term. That's a term where you start paying a contractor or pay a contractor for substantial completion. It's not necessarily when you start using stuff. That's usually an occupancy certificate or some other type of certificate. So it's kind of confusing to me because substantial completion is what I use with my contractors.
so in this context, this is also triggered, when are you gonna get your bond back?
Yeah, well, so that's what I'm saying.
So there's the tie with Kurt and the encroachment permit is if you satisfy substantial completion, he's gonna work the paperwork that you can get your bond back. Cause there's language of how long we have to list the bond.
What's the paperwork that he's got, he has to work?
What's the paperwork?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably how
What's it tied to? Because that should be tied to the bond back, not because substantial completion. If you have a contract, I keep going back to that because when you build something and you get to substantial completion, the contractor claims for a payment. Right, and you complete.
And I think that's where this came along as well, is folks asking for their bond back and saying, well, I think I've satisfied substantial completion. And Kurt, the first inspection is just a site visit of what's going where the location should be for that culvert or that encroachment. The second inspection is, okay, you've excavated, you've kind of got it set based on how we need it to set. So that's kind of where it was coming in with on the contractor side.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is that, the final inspection is what that bond release should be tied to, not substantial completion. See what I'm saying there?
Give me a second.
So there's a final approval inspection, so maybe you should define final approval inspection here, and that's when the bond is released. Because that's the way it is in the paperwork here.
Well, it wouldn't be the inspection itself. It would be,
That's the way it's written here.
but it wouldn't be, so let's say that you schedule the final completion inspection and it was found not to be satisfactory complete, so you have to reschedule it.
So your language in here is final/approval inspection.
Right, I think there's a subtle distinction between final/approval inspection and a satisfactory final inspection. So you could schedule that inspection, claim that it is done, then somebody with the village could show up to conduct that inspection, find that the village disagrees and have to reschedule it. So then in that situation, there would be two of those.
Well, so the village wouldn't sign it off, I assume.
So, but right, that's exactly,
They
that
might
might say.
come and look at it and say it's not done, but so it could be a sign off on the final approval.
Yes,
inspection.
exactly, yes.
That, I mean, that would work, but to me, substantial completion is tied to money. Every contract I've ever worked, substantial completion is tied to money.
Well, it is here too. This is a contract entered into by the property owner and the village, and it does upon completion mean that money is exchanged. Granted, it's simply a deposit going back, but this isn't not a contract. It isn't not involved in money.
I'm just trying to see if there's other references in this section, in this chapter, with reference to substantial completion. Because ultimately, all that language needs to tie together. So we've got the definition that we're talking about now. So I'm just going through the other provisions of the encroachment permit to see just how that aligns with that language. So, I mean, we can make additional language edits to this. That's the whole exercise of it. But at the same time, I also want to make sure the definition stays consistent
Yeah, no,
with the other sections. So
I get that, and that's my problem is that I've got a different definition of substantial completion, because I've been working with contracts for 40+ years. And it's typically tied to contractor pay money.
So there is,
My suggestion is that we just put in a village for a final approval inspection and then say that that's what this installation is. Final culvert installation is tied to the final approval inspection and the release of the.
so the suggestion is go to page 7 and add a term final, what was it, final?
So
Final
your
completion.
language in here is final/approval inspection. You have a first inspection, second inspection, if needed, and final approval inspection. So your second inspection could be the final approval inspection. And you can say acceptance of, in your definition there, it could be acceptance of final approval inspection is the date where the bond release starts.
So basically, Title VII should just reflect the verbiage that we already have in that
Yes,
contract,
yeah.
rather than substantial completion.
No, we needed both, because if you look at page 13, I think, where we talk about access, page 14, we talk about you have to have substantial completion prior to any construction or activity on the property. And the trigger with that is that means Public Works has been out at least 2 times to check the access to that property prior to. So I think if we add a definition of what is final and use the language that we have right now of acceptance and things of that nature. So that's going to be a new definition on page 7, right above fire truck, but after facilities. And then we have the definition of substantial completion, the way that is. I think it'll all catch up together in the rest of the ordinance. But that's what we'll do, Mr. Chairman, is we'll take that recommendation to add that definition using just the standard text that we have. And what acceptance of approved inspection.
Then it ties Title VII to this document,
Yes, absolutely.
and people can understand it if they need to have this money.
No, that makes total sense. So with respect to substantial completion, since we have another definition that talks about final. This one, I think the point was, there was no trigger from the inspection side of what satisfied a substantial completion. And Kurt wanted to at least, there's typically 3 inspections that are done on the property, that after the second, he could declare it substantially complete. Was what I got in talking to Kurt, that Now everybody understands, I can't do it after the first, I need to at least do the second. But there's typically three, and so if you're 2/3 of the way for me to give you a green line.
So then what I would do on here is instead of the substantial completion is at the time when there's acceptance of the second inspection. And that second inspection could be a second inspection as put on here or the final approval inspection. I just really feel like your substantial completion is confusing things there.
So the definition or recommendation would be the time when the work has progressed to the point for the acceptance of second inspection.
Yeah, the approval and acceptance of second inspection, and that second inspection could be a second inspection or the final approval inspection. Because this document says there's a first inspection, second inspection if needed, and a final approval inspection.
Okay.
So that second inspection could be either the second inspection or it could be the final / approval.
So what I'm hearing is everything in yellow that's highlighted, just strike that. And then just above it in the first sentence, the time when the work has progressed to the point for the approval or acceptance of its second inspection where it is sufficiently complete so that it or a specific part can be utilized for the purpose of which it is intended.
Yeah, because that makes more sense, because I can say I can use that culvert when I throw 3 logs in there.
Shouldn't it say final inspection? Isn't that technically why?
Well, so your document here has second inspection and final inspection, and the reason is it might not be 100% complete.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, it is complete to the point where it can be.
In the event that second inspection, so sometimes second inspection and final inspection are the same inspection, sometimes they are not. So in the event that they are not, then the one that we want to identify here is the second, not final.
And that's what we
Okay.
got. Yeah, because we just said acceptance or approval for the approval or acceptance of second inspection. We didn't say anything else beyond it, so. And I think saying it this way gets us the 2 triggers that Kurt was looking for, just to have a comfort level, so we don't have people like, well, you came out last, yeah, I just did the site visit. No, that's not substantially complete, but it also tracks with the other language that we have. Okay. We did not make any recommendations on page 12 or 13. Got to the next one on page 14, which was access. Kurt felt it was important to broaden the language out, so it's towards the bottom of the paragraph. Access permits shall be obtained before building permits may be issued or property is to be prepared for development. And I think that's kind of a conversation where we had prior to building development, you see activity for grading, you see activity for thinning, and there's also potential for heavier trucks to do that. And that was open-ended. They didn't require an encroachment permit, and then we didn't do a review for culvert access or storm runoff. And so this makes sense from not just Kurt's perspective, from a planning perspective as well. We've now made a declaration before you touch it for any development. This includes grading or removal of trees. 1 access permit is required for each access point. Connected driveways shall be considered 1 access point. Access permits must satisfy substantial completion requirements prior to any construction or activity on the property. So this was language that didn't exist before, but the idea is to capture the pre-development activity that we know has to happen on a lot of these lots. And defines for those circular drives, you can do that as 1 instead of 2, 2 permits. And again, the language on substantial completion before you can actually be authorized to get onto the property.
Guess I'm confused, because I read it, it sounds like we're saying an access permit is required for each ingress and each egress point, which would mean you need 2, and I thought we were just saying you only want to treat it as 1 driveway, and we're talking the definition, we're talking 4.
Yeah, so the third sentence, connected driveways shall be considered 1.
4 was just the definition of a connected driveway.
So we didn't have a definition of connected driveway before, so now we are proposing one. And with a recommendation from you guys, we'll add the language if it's, for example, a circular drive, But the idea is we could do that as one permit rather than two. And so for all the others would require one per each. And so it kind of provides the clarity, I think, Public Works would like cleared on some of these properties that have, substantial frontage. And we could treat that as one permit instead of two.
Yeah, that last sentence or second to last one, connects garage shall be considered one. That makes sense to me. I don't understand the one access permit is required for each ingress, egress point. And right after that, we say if it's connected, you only need one.
So for example, if you have an attached garage and a detached garage on each other driveway, that's two.
Okay.
But if you have the
Maybe in that we just say one access is required for each. Unconnected or something to make it a little bit
I
clearer.
agree that that might be slightly less appropriate language.
Okay, so if you're telling me I need two access permits with two driveways, I'm just gonna go create a road between them.
Yeah.
There you go. If you got the dirt to do it, if you could do that,
It's not a cliff and it's an amount of money that you're willing to spend.
so rather than each egress, each unconnected driveway.
Yeah. Better. Or to be unconnected egress point, just something to make it clear.
Okay. Okay. So on page 15, top. It just says an individual is required for getting bondage, and Kurt wanted more descriptive language. The owner, contractor, developer, anybody doing the work needs to be bonded. Defining that it's someone hired by the property owner. You could do a surety or performance bond, where right now the language is just a surety bond. Or financial guarantee of up to 110% of the total cost of improvements. If the homeowner or property owner is doing the work, then they show proof of liability insurance. And we do see that where it's the homeowner, kind of like the GC homeowner doing the work, that we still need to show some relevance of bondage. In case it goes sideways, there's a way to fix damage and move forward.
So if a homeowner doesn't have liability insurance, what happens in that?
What are they showing you right now? If a homeowner comes in for an encroachment permit and they show proof of insurance, what are they typically showing? Usually have that.
Yeah, so
It's rare, but I know that some homeowners prove, like the one over, well, he hired a contractor. Fine.
And so that's really hard because liability insurance is open-ended. If a homeowner gets a bond, is fine. I mean, that bond makes sense because you're purchasing a bond one time. That's good. But as a homeowner, if he has to go out and get liability insurance, how long does he have to carry it?
Good question.
30 minutes.
Again, it's.
Show want this and.
At least for the legal.
See, that's
I'm saying it,
That's not really practical though with an insurance company because they want long-term. Bond company, yes, because you pay the bond up front.
Is it possible just to see if you've got any examples of one that was done by a homeowner instead of a contractor?
yes. The next couple of minutes.
Well, we can come back to that,
Okay.
but ideally, that was the intent, because you do see it, I'm not saying it's 100%, but you do see homeowners who just want to do the work themselves. We do not feel that, well, that's fine, but at the same time, there needs to be some insurance.
Yeah,
That's,
so if you purchase a bond can have a term on it. 6 months, 12 months, whatever. Liability insurance, if you call an insurance agent and say, I want liability insurance for this, they're gonna charge the homeowner an arm and leg, number one, and number two, it's forever until they cancel it. And in practicality, they could purchase it for 1 month and then cancel it. How do you know?
Sure. But you're
So-
suggesting
so a
as
bond
a
is-
bond, tied to the project.
Yes. I mean, it makes much more sense to have a bond because. I mean,
Is that a performance bond that,
it would be a performance bond. Imagine,
what if we just added show proof of liability insurance or a performance bond?
I just can't see a homeowner going out and getting liability insurance for an encroachment permit.
So we may just drop that,
Just
show
doesn't
proof
make
of,
sense to me.
Yeah,
show proof of performance bond.
yeah, and even if they did, again, how do we know if
They
they
can't.
don't complete the project until 3 months later, how do you know that they carried the insurance for more than a month or for more than 5 days?
I think we're all trying to get to the same spot, and so making sure that it's covered by some policy, so. Is this, what I've got in my notes now is just strike the last 2 words. So that instead of proof of liability insurance, it's proof of performance bond.
So the other thing is the 110% of total cost of improvements. What does that include?
Depends on the job that they're proposing. So if the job that they're proposing is, a big cut plus a culvert plus, you know, or is it just the culvert itself? Or just the, I think it's specific to the job that's being proposed.
Yeah, so I think maybe 110% of total access cost of improvements, because if you're building
So total cost of improvements for access?
yeah. Because that's kind of separates it from if you're building a Kentucky Fried Chicken or something. I mean, is it 110% of the entire facility or is it 110%?
I see what you're saying. It's whatever is that for that access. So what I've got is we'll add, 110% of the total cost of improvements for access. And, then the comma. And then at the last sentence, strike liability insurance, proof of performance bond.
Yeah, I just think liability insurance is too vague for a homeowner.
No, I get it. I also know that from the village perspective, just trying to make sure that if something goes wrong,
Or if there's a bond in place, then that's what it does.
that's exactly, that was the intent. Is that if something goes wrong, there's something to cover it so it gets repaired correctly. So the next one is on the requirements for encroachment permits. Adding a number 11. The dimension between the edge of right of way and edge of street. I think Scott actually had another suggestion of dimension from the center line to the property.
It's listed as center line, do you think? Use the center line of the street, the physical street, and the center line of the right of way. Part of the issue is here, that often the center line of the street and the center line of the right of way can be very different.
Yes. I think in my head, the way Scott was describing it, so you're gonna show El Camino Real, 2 lines giving that illustration of the road. And then your property line, and you're gonna put a culvert in between it. So you have a dimension from the edge of the street to the edge of the right of way to your property. It's 12 feet, whatever, 10 feet. And then you'll have another dimension from the center line that will give you perspective of from the middle of the road to your edge of the right of way, what that would be. So it could be 2 numbers. Center line to edge of right of way is 25 feet, or it's 5 feet plus 20, it's 25 feet.
Yeah, so almost all drawings that I've seen here in Angel Fire are from center line to proper, or to center line to right. That's what all the columns are.
Okay.
Which edge of right of way is essentially property line, right?
It is. I think Kurt was asking for a dimension between the right of way and the edge of the street, where it was, because that's where that's where your culvert's typically gonna go. So he was trying to get an idea of is this, are we dealing with 3 feet, 5 feet, 8 feet? 12 feet? What are we dealing with?
Yeah, so one of the problems with dirt roads is just like Barbara was saying, is that today it's here, tomorrow it's there.
And it's exactly, that might be part of what was Kurt's thinking is I want at least somebody tell me, before I go out there, this is kind of the environment I'm looking for. So I don't have a disagreement in adding 2 dimensions. Center line to the edge of right of way, and then just from the edge of the street to the edge of the right of way, so that there's some idea what we're dealing with from Public Works of how big that gap is, where we know we need an access point. I don't think there's a bad deal to ask for 2 dimensions.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think you just need to be clear and say the existing street or street as it is today, because I can tell you, dirt roads move with different.
I get it. It's easy enough to add existing street on number 11.
Yeah.
That's fine. So the next paragraph was really, there are sections in Title VII where it says you get your permit from Public Works or you get your permit from Planning and Zoning. And so that first suggestion is to just make it consistent to be Planning and Zoning. Oh, I forgot. Above that, we were also adding proof of insurance. Or bond,
Yeah, that's.
or performance bond.
So do you have homeowners give you their homeowners insurance if they have an existing?
I would say, I don't imagine that that's gonna cover something that happens off of their property.
I don't know.
Because this is on village property.
Yeah, typically it's in the right of way.
Yeah.
I just think to make it consistent with what we just talked about,
Yeah, no, that's,
proof of insurance or performance bond, I agree, makes it all together. Number 2, I just think making it consistent on who's looking at what. And then adding, the language did not include grading or removal of trees. Adding that language, which also goes with the previous section where we talked about before you do any activity on the property, we want to see an encroachment permit. So this kind of matches that, what you saw in the previous.
just playing devil's advocate here. What if a homeowner is, already has a driveway, already has everything and is, making improvements on their land? If they already have a driveway and everything, but they want to put a different, another one in the future. Can they remove trees? Can they do stuff in advance? I mean, if they have an existing driveway? I mean, I'm just saying is,
So this is really for all new driveways, and we know that there are properties that are vacant, but they have some approach that maybe it already has a culvert, I don't know, but we looked at a property 4 weeks ago. There was an old logging road that went down. But I don't know that it was actually to the standards that we would require. So even though there was this previous access that everybody knew it was there, but nobody could tell when it was approved or how it got there. We did have that contractor come in for an encroachment permit just because it just didn't feel that, or look to be that it was actually working for the weight of the trucks that were coming in because they were thinning.
right,
And they were going to use that same approach once the house was built. Might as well just do.
How about if it's just a situation where a homeowner's fire cutting his lot and claiming it? Where there's no approachment to it. He's just doing it for fire protection and,
Is there a house on the lot?
yeah, he's not even planning on a house yet, but he just doesn't. He wants to follow the guidelines with defensive space and clean that lot out. Like the resort, I wish they could go up there and clean a bunch of theirs out. But how would that fall into play here with the removal of trees?
So my understanding is when you want to be in compliance with Firewise, you're not taking out 2 or 3 trees. You're taking out quite a few. So we would ask that they get a permit for that encroachment. So as they thin and fall trees, the trucks that are coming in to take them out are doing it on an approved access point that also accommodates the storm drain that's required to go through that
So
lot.
it's an access point, it's not a beginning of an established driveway.
It's an encroachment permit, and it's an encroachment permit prior to you doing any other development on the property, including the thinning of trees. And, just like the gentleman who saw the logging truck that appeared out of nowhere. Yeah, exactly. So that logging truck is not a little, and so we want to be able to capture the vehicle of that size and weight coming off the bar ditch and getting onto the lot the right way. So that's why we were pretty forceful in saying, including grading, including tree removal. So
It's just reaching across the edge.
I've been telling people is if you're doing it on foot, then don't worry about it. If you're doing it with a truck, you
Yeah.
need proper encroachment, because it's gonna damage the edge of the roadway, it's gonna change how drainage happens. So if you're gonna go
Makes sense.
look at how you're gonna site a building, or if you're gonna go stake something out on foot, great, don't worry about it. But if you're going on there with a truck to do anything with trees, realistically, you're not hauling those off on foot. So you're going with a truck, so you.
what we'd like to do is actually see people get a little ahead of the game. Look at that access point as they're talking about thinning and where's the foundation gonna go? So how much clearing do I need to do? And where's my drive gonna be aligned to get to the road? Come get that permit. And so then all your trucks, as they're bringing in concrete, as they're bringing in sheetrock, they're all coming and they're not just running across the bar ditch. That's kind of, I think overall, that makes the better road conditions because our storm drain is actually working better because we've got a correct encroachment to accommodate the truck weight and the flow, so.
Understand that someone, if they're building something new, it can be kept up with, maintained. If somebody's, I've had people come and clear trees out of my lot and I've never gone any route like that. To go get the permit to take the slash and the long driveway. But yeah, they've driven in sometimes where it's not on the driveway because it's the easiest way to access that. It's nothing I was ever aware of and knew that was happening was an issue. Right, so I'm not sure how you're gonna keep that up unless somehow it's tied into if you're getting the, well, even I wish,
So that's
Angel's, what's his name here that does the stuff with the long,
Right.
with the firewood and stuff.
Right.
Do they do, yeah, does Randy, do they do something
I
like
don't know.
that? And I think that's gonna be hard to,
So I agree. I think this is really geared for new construction because the way it's being set up now is when they come in for a building permit for a new build, the first question is, well, let's look at your encroachment permit.
then we should probably word that in here so that somebody's not coming back 2 years later and saying, oh, you did that wrong when you were clearing the trees from your lot.
So there is another section on that.
Okay.
So we'll get to it because again, I think we've mentioned this title has not been practiced uniformly. And because of that, there are driveways that they're not working. Either they were undersized or they didn't get for whatever reason, it's not working. And so you'll see that there's a recommendation. 5-6 years, guys, you got to bring this into compliance because it's impacting our roads. But again, this is really geared towards the new construction. Unless you have an access point and an encroachment that didn't get a permit because you were told you didn't need one because you didn't need a culvert. But your encroachment is just not working. It's damming water or whatever it's doing. It's just not working. We need to be able to find out which ones those are. And I'm not saying that just because you got a permit, everything is fine, because some of the permits that were issued, we know that they approved the wrong size culvert. Or they recommended a box culvert that there was only a 6-inch differential. And this thing's just filling with sediment after one rain. So I think there's provisions we're trying to capture on that, but I think it's gonna be hard otherwise to put everything in review without some type of knowledge of this one's good, we're gonna need to see this one again. And then identify who should try to come in compliance 6 years down the road.
Well, if you're gonna go in and remove trees now, like they'll 10 years from now, you get an encroachment permit now to take the trees out and
And you're good.
it should still be good.
It's really good.
So what is a transverse drop inlet culvert?
This is where it's open at the top. So the storm water comes in through the top, rather, in addition to water flow through the bar ditch can come in. So it's designed primarily if the road profile is lower than your property, you've got all this runoff coming down, it just goes out to the street. So the transverse culvert is to capture that storm water coming off and keeping it in the bar ditch. So that it matches the flow that is coming downstream.
Looks like a miniature calendar.
Yeah.
There's no place where that was required before, but somebody told me it was required several years ago, but I've seen many built without it since.
That's correct. And so that goes to the uniformity. That was really more policy. It wasn't actually in the ordinance. But you had some streets department directors saying, I need it because everything's just sheet flowing down into the street. Makes sense. But there was no real standard as to what that should be. And so that's why this language at the bottom of 16, top of 17 is being proposed, is that there's some semblance of weight capacity, and slopes, things of that nature, but that's really what it's for. And this is also the next section where if you were in non-conformance as of December of this year, you have until December of 2032 to get it fixed. And so that's the first part where we talked about, we know there's some grandfather culverts out there that just aren't working. Or they never got a culvert, or they got a culvert, but it didn't capture the sheet flow coming from top. And it's just blowing off onto the road, and we really need to get it fixed. That's why this language, the last sentence has been included in that. Because those, I think most folks would agree, are having a really big impact on our roads. And that's part of the dance that we're doing, is how do we make the roads stay maintained better, longer, if we can capture the storm that's storm drain correctly, so that it minimizes that impact. So that's why this language was proposed.
So you also mentioned box culverts several times. I think your definition of box culverts may be different than mine. What is your definition?
Did we say?
I'm not sure, you just mentioned it a few times, but to me, a box culvert is typically a culvert over 6 foot in diameter and square on each side and
Looks like a box.
looks like a box. Much easier to put in.
Doesn't find that. Don't define, outside of this language here is how we define a transverse culvert. But we don't put it in the definitions, and that's okay, because it says right here of what that is. But we don't have a definition of a box culvert.
What's your definition?
I go ahead and ask Scott to.
What's your definition of a box culvert? Just anyone even, I'm sorry, how big it is?
I think we should, because like we have on transverse culvert, we have weight capacity, match the flow of an 18-inch culvert. I think if we're gonna define a box culvert, we should have some similar language, or it should have that capacity to accommodate. So if you have a suggestion on a box culvert,
No, I just want to make sure that when you mentioned box culvert, it's the same thing in my mind. And what I'm used to building is huge facilities, and when you get a corrugated culvert up to a certain diameter, they're not efficient at all. So you typically go with the box culvert. The box culvert is, all that I put in have been over 6 foot by 6 foot. So I don't think we've done any better.
I've seen these transfers where they also have on top, and it's just the standard culvert.
Page 6.
I haven't seen a box.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
there's a U ditch. Right, a U ditch is typically a prefabricated ditch and that could either be square or it could be round, and could be the start. It's typically concrete though.
Yep.
Not corrugated. But that could be the start of your transverse culvert, but just mentioned box culvert several times and I keep going to the 6 foot by 6 foot ones. Sorry.
We're on page 16, so.
Thank you.
I know that you had sent a recommendation that we get a dimension from the road center line to the edge of property, so we've added that on page 16 as the number 12, under the dimensions of getting a edge of right of way to the edge of street, of existing street was the suggestion, but adding another dimension from center line is something that has been proposed on the application. Do folks feel that this is enough time for the culverts that are not in compliance? From 2026 to 2032 to bring in, or I think it's kind of open-ended of how long folks should have to come into compliance.
Well, so I guess there's two things here is their notification to those folks. Notification should be made, 6 months before that and 12 years before that. Well, yeah, but I'm saying. And repeatedly. Yes, but there has to be a notification time so that they're aware that they are not in compliance.
So then let's move the date from December 2026 to maybe June 1st, 2027. And then it also be June 1st of 2033. So that notification can, to property owners can be completed by end of May.
Then who is it that's determining that they're out of compliance?
Public Works Director.
So that I want to put that in there as well, that it's.
Something tells me I think Bert has a list of what's not working out in the field.
So that's fine. Does
To come up with,
you want people to know that they're on the list?
I'm sorry.
Do people know they're on the list?
No, I don't think they do, but I think he has an idea of where to start on these culverts that are that would not be in compliance. So I'll add an extra 6 months and year to December 1st, 2027, December 1st, 2033. With the right before penalties, property owners of non-conforming drop culverts, transverse drop culverts shall be notified by Director of Public Works no later than May 3rd.
Do we have to call out transverse drop culverts or any non-complying encroachment?
We could leave it as non-compliant, non-compliance, encroachment, I think is probably best.
Because then they might have a collapsed culvert or something similar to that.
Property owners of non-compliant encroachments be notified by Public Works Director no later than May 30th, 2027. Penalties and fines for non-compliance shall be established by resolution.
Village resolution.
We've been using established by village resolution or by resolution. The intent is that if the council is going to set that fee or whatever that is.
Okay.
This is good. I think we've captured what we're trying on these. Kurt recommended just, hey, if your property's got a vertical slope greater than the road profile, this is what you need. And now you see some other language where there's a percentage. And then you get into, well, I'm at 12, I think you're at 15, I feel I'm at 9. This just, hey, the road's lower than your property.
So, what about keeping it clean?
So there's a new provision that we're actually asking is that the village be able to clean out culverts for sediments. Right now, that's not clear that they have the right to do it. There's also debate early on to, for right now, water meters are just installed by the village. Was a time where, short time, where contractors would do that with permission from the water department, and Kurt says, we're caught up, we're just gonna do them all over again. We, I guarantee the work. There was a conversation of, why don't we do the same with culverts? The only culverts can be installed by the village. It's the village right away. But that's kind of the extent as it went. It did go beyond.
I want to build tomorrow on the village.
Right, and that's probably fair enough. But at least we're proposing later on in this chapter that the village has the right to clear it for sediment. And I think you will hear from Kurt, they've got the equipment to do it. And it's just.
Not charge the landowner?
It's our guess, what you find out is most of the time the culvert being blocked is from the motor graders pushing debris in there.
And that would be around level.
Yes, either one, whatever it is, that the village be allowed to clear sediment out, and we've got the equipment to do
I
that.
know of some people that have the box culverts, and it's a nightmare to keep them clean. So, yeah, there's so much fill when it rains into them, and then the only way you can really do it is pull the drill and shovel it out.
Well, right now, I think the idea is, we know some of the properties where that's a problem, they're just clogged and everything's flowing back out on the street. Having something in the ordinance that says the village can clear that just for sediment. Now, whether or not the village sends an invoice, I don't know, but at least give us the right to wash it out.
Because I helped this one gentleman with the fire truck. I just did a training session, we took the fire truck up there and blew it out. But when water's cheap.
I think when we get to that section,
It
we need
works
to
well. but
change the wording on it some to either, because to me, it's either if they're not gonna charge to do it, then we should just assume they're gonna do it for everyone, right? It's not but if they are gonna charge, there's gotta be some warning to the owners about it, that they're falling behind on keeping it clean. Do it all, or else they're gonna be charged.
I agree. I think what we can do when we get to that section is we can add the language like we just saw, is that the village council can set that assessment for cleaning out by resolution. So that everybody understands there's a public hearing, what that fee is gonna be, if we're gonna assess a fee. So I like that idea. I think we should add it when we get to that point. The last thing on page 17 is we've added a letter I that I think it's belt and suspenders. Encroachment connections where the vertical slope is greater than the road profile, transverse drop in like home. And I just updated it to, must be satisfied by 2033, December 1st.
But you have the upon the sale of property. So that means.
It could come sooner.
If you're selling the property for 45 years or.
We want it to come sooner. We want it to be tied into that. And so is that enough? So that you have the authority to get the money out of the owner to put it in?
Probably need to say whichever comes first, because otherwise you could say.
Yeah, whichever-
Yes,
whichever
5
first.
years lapse, but I'm gonna sell in 5 more years, so you don't get to pick the latter, you have to pick the sooner.
Whichever comes first.
That's just how it's typically written.
Those are 3 words I'm gonna add.
So the other thing that I would add is for other approved engineering design. Because transverse drop culvert isn't the only way to.
Okay, I see. So after the word culvert, I'll add the parentheses for other approved. What was the language you said? Other
Engineering design.
engineering design.
Nitpicky question.
Yeah.
What's the distinction between vertical slope and slope?
If we can find that.
And it's like this, you know,
I mean,
Yeah.
slope that rounds.
Find slope.
Typically, mathematically, supervised on the right and right, so it's not.
Don't have the definition or not.
Unless there's something that pertains to road grading or engineering. that I'm not familiar with. I think
So maybe take out vertical there and put property. Just show
Or
that.
add vertical slope of property.
Well, vertical, that's what he's saying,
Well,
it's vertical and slope are then,
Oh,
they're the same thing.
slope is just rise over run, right?
so what was the suggestion instead of saying vertical slope? Property?
Just say,
But it isn't really, because what if your property was acknowledged to be rather steep? So your driveway was built up a little bit to make it less steep, so then it's not the slope of the property so much as it is the slope of the actual driveway.
So what do we
just making a distinction between the roadway and the
Driveway slope
right.
rather than verticals.
Okay, so,
Just how I.
so how do we, where am I adding the words?
I would replace, so if we, for example, replace the word vertical with the word driveway, does that satisfy everybody's idea of what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Okay.
The driveway slope is greater than the road profile? Okay.
Sense.
All right. So the next section is cul-de-sacs. Page 17 and 18. And the suggestion is there's a maximum length for cul-de-sacs, maximum number of units on cul-de-sacs. But if, in addition to the cul-de-sac design, there are also alternative methods for turnarounds that are done through the fire department. And so the recommendation is to strike B and C to add letter B, number 1. So letter B, number 1, if you could do a hammerhead, you can do, there's like a Y shape, and those have dimensions called out in the fire standards. We didn't cite the code. We didn't cite the chapter in the International Fire Code. I think it's chapter 14, but they do have their required dimensions and radius and things of that nature. So, for example, between Zeb's and True Value, the idea is that development is going to use just this my head, hammerhead. So it's going to be a T that comes in that's got the proper radius from the fire department to say, yeah, we can get an engine, back it up, and then we can leave. And we had another proposed development near the 1 million gallon tank where there wasn't room for a cul-de-sac to come in, but there was room to do a hammerhead or a Y. And so that's why the suggestion was is removing the cul-de-sac specific language to open it up for flexibility depending on property of what's the proper method to get an engine in and out plus an ambulance. The fire chief did recommend on letter B, which was formerly letter D, to add the words unobstructed. You'll see it 3 times. Yep. He's just like, look, I just don't want any ambiguity that somebody says, well, I got the radius, it's 50 feet. It's like, yeah, but you put meters or a tree here. That needs to be unobstructed. Fair enough. So,
So the other problem, one of the things I had was a cul-de-sac is not just a turnaround. It's the whole street. So the language should be the unobstructed radius of the turnaround right of way should be 50 feet and the unobstructed driving surface of the turnaround should be at least 40 feet. Because the cul-de-sac is the whole street from the intersection.
correct. So I'm sorry. So where was that?
B,
Letter B, you were asking.
where minimum unobstructed radius of the turnaround right of way shall be 50 feet. And the
So add
minimum unobstructed
turnaround.
driving surface of the turnaround radius at least 40 feet.
So add turnaround. Okay. And I think that's gets us in line with what the fire chief was asking for too. He's like, look, I just don't want any issues with something popping up, a fence or playground equipment, totally unobstructed. Was there a third spot you said?
No, there's only 2.
Okay, we'll add
Well, it's
turnaround.
the right of way and the radius, and the pavement.
So we'll add the word turnaround. And then we're just relabeling. E is now C, F is now D on cul-de-sacs.
And then I would, again, on what now was F and then is B, is shall end in a temporary cul-de-sac. And to me, you want that located on right of way or dedicated easement. You don't want that extending out past the right of way. You can't just end a 50-foot right of way or 60-foot right of way heading into the end of your flat. You've got to give you the property to have the turnaround on.
So you want us to add constructed the village specifications on village right of way?
Yeah, it shall end in a temporary cul-de-sacs located on a dedicated right of way or easement, whichever the preference is. Designed and constructed to the village specifications. The other one that I've gone into in other subdivisions is that some people have gone in and just put the cul-de-sac so that it touches the edge of their plat, the bubble.
Right.
Well, then when you try to extend that, you don't have the right of way. And so that the full right of way has to extend to the boundary of the plat. That would be the last addition on the bottom of that paragraph.
So what was that? So
The full right of way shall extend to the boundary of the plat. For a future extension. That's what we're talking about here. I've seen it done, but then you go crap, you got these little slivers of land.
full right of way shall extend to,
The boundary of the plat.
all right, this is great. Any other comments on cul-de-sacs? And skip ahead. Unless anything caught anybody's
I was
eye.
looking at 7148 projected traffic volumes,
Yep,
and under the way I read this, a single family house has to do an STH.
okay,
And so I would come in and say, all developing, the first sentence. All developing or redeveloping properties except individual single family lots providing access points are requested. And so forth, and shall be submit the. Because right now, to me, it read that you had to have everybody that's developing or redeveloping has to do an STH. And a house development of putting a single family house on a lot is development.
so I would. I think. There's a couple of ways I'm thinking, is that. If I'm coming up with a brand new subdivision of 100 lots,
Right.
I
You need
I
one.
wanna see.
Then I was gonna add
If
another,
I'm- if
new
I'm
subdivision
coming-
shall require an STA.
Well, so I think that's in the state access management manual. I think it defines it that for a residential lot, you don't have to do an STH.
Where did you think that the state access management manual?
Yeah.
May already have that exemption?
May already have that exemption.
Oh.
Not familiar with that one.
Yeah, well, I'm not 100% familiar with it, but you know that.
So we may already have, we already may have an out clause for that.
I would verify that though. Look at that, but I think it does, it defines like rural property and stuff like that.
But the SCH, but the state access manual is not adopted by this clause. It only says that it's available in dependencies. It does, has the village adopted that manual formally? To use the definitions and all the criteria in that manual.
I would
I
have
don't
to
know
check, I would have to check, that's a different, there's a different section for traffic. I wanna say it might be Title 5 or Title 6. Cause it's also with the police department, cause they regularly do updates to take the recently adopted traffic, state of New Mexico traffic.
So all I was saying is that a subdivision, yes, has to do one, but the development of an individual lot does not.
Understood. So we'll just I think what we'll do is we'll just double check the state access management manual. If, is it in there or not? And if it's not, we will add a sentence to exclude the already developed subdivision and it's the third vacant lot.
Right. Yeah, and then, I mean, that it's like McDonald's and stuff, has to do one. Big commercial properties.
All do. I understand that we all want it, absolutely.
I've only seen this with respect to properties that are coming in, because most of the subdivisions are already platted, right? But like the property next to Zeb's that's coming online, they had to get an encroachment from DOT, so I believe they had to do this study as well. So we may not be seeing it because it's a state highway, but someone's asking for it.
I just read the first line says, a site threshold assessment shall be required for all developing and redeveloping properties. That seems very broad and touches everybody in the world.
Well, I'm gonna double check that the
Go on.
exemptions may exist already in that manual, and if they don't, I'll make a provision for that paragraph.
You didn't have any comment going on, you didn't have any comments on private roadway.
Did not,
The only comment I had on there is that the definition of a private way is not in the book, not in our code. So either we need to use private way and define it, or we need to change all the references to private ways as to private roadway, which is the heading of the section.
I see what you're saying. So the title is private roadway, and the first sentence, the first paragraph is private ways.
Right, and then throughout the whole section, the word private ways used over and over and over. And then there is, under A, there is one reference to a major collector, which we don't have any definition of major collectors. All we have is collectors in the definitions.
Right. I think if we just swapped out private ways to private roadways, is,
Just trying to be consistent.
sorry. Unless there's any other option folks want to do, we'll just recommend changing out the words. Yeah, letter C, it starts using private roadway.
It's 8 locations throughout the whole section.
Well, we'll make them all consistent
Right.
to private roadway. Kristen, where are your highlighter? This is- Okay,
Santos, while we're on that. Do you know what the street or the road that goes to Wattville is?
so
Is
as far as a collector or,
yeah, is that a private
it's not a private street, it's a village street.
village street?
Yeah, there's actual road sign. What's this, what is this like? It's not Dolores or something, it's got a name.
Well, it's Martinez. It used to be, but that sign is gone. The only thing that's there now is a stop sign coming onto the main road.
There's a reference on the subdivision map that calls out a street name.
Okay.
Dolores is stuck in my head. I don't,
Well, it's a family name. It's 3 or 4 words.
I think you're right, yes,
Yeah.
but that is technically a village street.
Okay.
Construction of required improvements, we didn't have any proposed recommendations on those. The only thing that was proposed is on page 24, acceptance of maintenance improvements. That, just that the verbiage be changed. The Public Works Director shall prepare an assessment and recommendation of roadway and public infrastructure acceptance for consideration for approval of the village council.
Yep.
Because then it goes on that the Public Works Director shall pretty much say that it's, the improvements have been satisfactorily completed. Developer shall furnish the village Public Works, as-built plans.
Any comments on that, anybody? Next comes, I have it on page 28.
Just looking at this, what I'd like to do is I think it's appropriate where the word appropriate starts, appropriate governmental entity fee and clear of liens and encumbrances. I'm gonna try to add that review back, because I don't want the village to accept improvements and there's liens on properties. But I do feel that the public works director needs to make an assessment or a recommendation to village council that we like it or we don't kind of thing. So I'm just gonna work a new sentence that talks about liens and encumbrances back in.
Excellent.
But I didn't have any other comments.
So I guess like, my question is the public works director shall prepare an assessment and recommendation of roadway and public infrastructure acceptance. Isn't his final inspection kind of his assessment?
So there's two things going on.
Yeah, I know, I just think, I'll go ahead.
So the village council has to formally accept a road, right? Way this recommendation is trying to work is that part of that review for council to determine whether or not they want to accept it is this work from the public works director saying, this is my assessment of the improvements, public infrastructure for them to consider. That it's, there wasn't, if you look at it, it's all improvements shall be completed upon the discretion of the public works director. But there was never a language for the council to actually be given a recommendation. And so that's what that's trying to capture. I know the punch list of.
Yes, no, I get it. I'm just trying to think of preparing this assessment. Recommendation.
He's a busy man.
Yeah. A lot of stuff in here, and he's already done the final inspection. So, I mean,
And this,
I'm just thinking of typically, I know we don't have a village engineer, but that would be a village engineer's job. It's more of a desk paperwork job, and I see Kurt's job is more out.
so. Just trying to see, so everything with required improvements is in this 4 pages, 5 pages. When the resort submitted the subdivision for the 53, 57 homes behind Lowe's, and they got a preliminary plat approved, their engineering plans were substantially good. So then it required a field inspection with the public works, well, at that time it was streets director and water department. So they walked it with the engineer of the developer to go over alignments for placements and installations. I believe this language is really for when, like Sage Lane, when Sage Lane was built, it wasn't built as a village road. But then there was a petition to accept it as a village road, right? And this is trying to capture those instances, like Buckskin was a county road. And it was not accepted originally by the village into its inventory. And if you look at the resolution, when council accepted Buckskin, it also hired Kiker Construction and said Kike. So everyone understands that there were some dedicated improvements that needed to happen specific to, I think it was like a 90-degree, then they needed a more curvature into it, take out another bend. So there was language specific saying, we'll take this road so long as these improvements are made. And then the village went out to confirm with its engineers that, yes, this was done in accordance with that. That's what this part is just trying to capture. It's in those instances of the village accepting this, that was in the county inventory before, or the resort inventory, and now we're just taking it over. That's the idea of this. I understand Kurt's capacity on time is pretty limited, but this is really intended for those instances where it's like Flamingo Road, I think was the last, what we heard was the last road that was accepted into the village inventory. The new West Flamingo Road that goes to workforce housing with the infrastructure that's underneath it would be Kurt gives a punch list, this is good, so that we can accept it, so.
road that's kind of a nightmare for me is the old Elliott Barker Lane, because I live on it. Well, the village had changed the name of that road to Smoky Bear Court. When they did that, they never registered it with Google. And when that happened, everything in my shipping is a nightmare. Because I can't go by Smoky Bear Court because it doesn't come up on Google. And it ends up sending them to Eagle Nest.
So Smoky Bear, isn't it the first right off of Elliott Barker?
It's the very first right, yeah. And that was back in the day, the village had said if we bring that up to standard, they would accept that road. But that road goes beyond where it turns into Daniel's Furnace, because it goes all the way to the back to the end of that 10 acres and there's a cul-de-sac. And for that road to be up to standard, you'd have to go clear to that cul-de-sac. We've got it up to standard, actually better than Elliott Barker down to Cernas because Daniel and I did it. Just because we got tired of the mud bog. But that road's all good to there. But the issue is, how can that get reported to Google?
Right, there's two different things. So to get it accepted by the village, I think we need to coordinate time for this punch list to say, yes, this is 60-foot right of way could be dedicated. The crown is correct, the bargage is, the drainage is working, that's fine. And that's a logical step to take to get in. It's not the first, I remember doing that when I was the manager too. I actually drove out to see, because Daniel's like, hey man, we've been working on this. I think this is good to accept. So I drove out to see it, and you're
But
right.
it's only that first.
Yes, but, I still think there's a path to get that portion accepted. We just need to find out what the improvements were made, how those improvements were made, that they match here, that we can get the resolution to the council to say we'll accept up from this segment. Well, however that goes. Getting it to Google, I can't, there's nobody here who can help you with that. Those guys are in San Francisco. You know, I think for the longest time, I couldn't see Dollar General on the aerial maps because they just didn't care. And people have been encouraged to, you can do a update map, you know, rename the road and do that interaction. And I just don't know if anybody's.
It's successful, but it could take 12 to 18 months.
Or years, because that street view for Angel Fire, if you looked at it, there's a lot of misses on what's actually built out on 434 compared to what's in the area for 2026. I can't really provide any guidance on that on the Google side, because those guys are they never answer the phone. They just want an email. And then you never know if they even read it. So.
Because the Elliott Barker Lane, the 12C Elliott Barker Lane works. So they see the Smoky Bear Court street sign and it just totally messes them up. They can follow the Google and get them there, but it's training every new driver.
Well, I've been driving around seeing those driverless Ubers that get freaked out on puddles of rain in the street, not knowing to stop, you know. So there's a lot of strangeness going on with all the things that are making our lives better. The only other thing we have on page 26, and this is something you'll see consistent in all the chapters, any reference to a fee, we're striking out so that it's just to be set by the village. There are some provisions, and I don't know why, where the village clerk is authorized to send notices and be notified of. It's like, that really shouldn't be the village clerk. It's just, I don't know why it's the village clerk. So those are two instances where you'll see strikeouts, where there's a specific fee mentioned. In this one, we just struck that last sentence because the sentence before it says it'll be set at village cost by resolution. So you'll see that periodically in chapters 1, 2, and 3, but that's the real intent of it, is that the village council should just set those rates every year as needed. Page 27.
Going back to, I'm sorry, going back to that on the fees, the only thing with this is that kind of takes out where being brought to people's attention. Does that make sense? I understand changing it to where the village council is setting the fees and where you're removing the set dollar amounts and stuff. But doesn't it make sense still to have some notification of it or?
There is.
wording in there?
So every time the village looks to make a resolution with respect to fees, there's a public notice on that.
Okay.
And it's listed on the agenda, and it'll say what fees are being adjusted. And that's typically in June of every year when the budget is being
Oh, you're right.
updated.
Yeah, I saw that one.
So we just want all that to be mirrored with the other practices of the council. But yes, there is public notice of that. We mentioned this last week that there are some roads with the topography of the village that you can't store anything except the street. 'Cause that's the closest to the flatness in the area that you can actually put construction materials while you're building or whatever it is that you are trying to do to develop that property. So it was strongly recommended that we come up with some language to give that allowance. We kind of mirrored, the encroachment permit is good for X number of days. We need a site plan for that. Where are you gonna put it? We want something similar for these areas where there's gonna be storage. We want to make an assessment of the road surface. And we really need that to match when you're done and all this is moved, the road surface is back like it was prior to you touching it. So that's the idea with this language, that the council could come up with, what those deposits, bonds should look like. We may require traffic control signage, complete with a management plan. Tell us on the site plan where you're gonna store materials. You can't impede traffic. Whatever you put on the road, we gotta maintain two-way traffic. Can't store prior to your encroachment or building permit. It's good for 180 days. You could get one more extension. We talked about damage to the roadway, and the expenses. Inspections that would be required.
So, I have a suggestion for the title of this, instead of encroachments, because you're talking about encroachments all over.
Yeah.
Why not, public right of way obstructions or
Or use the public right of way.
or use of public right of way or something like that. Because if you're doing a word search for encroachment requirements or something, then
So
this was the first one you fall on. And I mean, it's just a suggestion.
So I think that's fine. I would prefer to do it right after the number one. Whatever we want to call this. Because the rest of this section on encroachments and litters talks about snow removal, things of that nature. And it says, the first paragraph is you can't obstruct the public way. But number one says if you are, it's only under this condition. So
That's why I'm saying the title of the section should be obstructions. Public right of way.
Okay,
That makes sense to you. Because that's what you're talking about in here, the whole way is obstructions and variances from obstructing and,
I see what you're saying. So just in the actual title itself. Gotcha. Obstruction of public ways, comma, litter prohibited.
I'll take another ticky-tacky one, which there's no definition of public way. It should be right of way all throughout the entire section. It's public way is used numerous locations throughout, but there's no definition. And what we're talking about is the right of way.
Public right of way? Public right of way?
Well, all right of ways are public. Well, public right of way if you want, that's my opinion. But it's used in 6 different or 8 different places.
private ways.
I understand. Yeah, that just, it hit me. But there's numerous, you'll have to search through it and find them. It's throughout the whole section. It says public way.
So, we'll change out the title to obstruction to public right of way, comma, litter prohibited.
Okay.
Letter A is obstruction, public right of ways, was in a colon, no person shall obstruct place upon the village public right of way.
We need litter prohibited. Wait to take that out.
It's, well, because we talk about it in letter B.
That's obstruction to the right of it, right?
So just say obstructions, strike litter.
Well, you can talk litter. Letter B is fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. If we just do the heading, everything kind of flows together.
Yes.
Okay, easy enough. Was there any of the proposed language that you guys felt needed to
Only
be?
question I had, wouldn't it make sense to have, there's nothing here saying that the permit has to be posted or something at it, so you can have this stuff out in the road and you don't know whether there's.
That's a good call, yeah. What we'll do is relabel after letter E. We'll add a new letter E that the approved storage permit must be posted on site. And then everything, E will be F, F will be G, G will be H.
How is the penalty issued for violations?
Be set by council.
Okay, because there's that one up there behind by, Via Del Rey going up there, Belleville. There was that house built on the right-hand side where they had the lumber on the road all winter. Oh, I think the village actually finally just pushed it off the edge for the snowplow.
Okay.
But the porta potty is actually still sitting there. Okay, so and that porta potty really probably should not be up there on that road right away.
Understood.
That brings up a question that I had. So with regards to D, the 180 days, we have some other things that are restricted to season, basically. Like, can we envision circumstances where it would be truly reasonable for somebody to have a big pile of construction material on the road from December through February on a moderate snow year? Or should there be some restriction that it's, in addition to 100 days maximum, should it also be not the heavy snow months, because that would be a harder thing for snow removal crew to deal with? Does anybody have an opinion about that?
I think that would be part of it, but I mean, it's not as if they stopping construction or stopping things. Just because of the weather, you know, if there's a heavy snowstorm, but they're still clearing stuff and working on it, so.
If there's a heavy snow in October, sure, but do we have people who are bringing up in January?
Does that say that this is a permit issued by the village council? The whole thing, it starts off with, there's a permit required. And when that permit is issued, they should take into account the duration.
Okay, but then, so then who has? If it doesn't prohibit it in this document, then
So I've seen a house. Foundation was poured, utility, stub outs were approved before November. And through the whole winter, they started framing, and then they were doing all the interior sheet rocking because the foundation's gonna. Utility. So I have seen where January, February, there's still work on it because that's how they wanted to time it. Does everybody do that? I don't, I think a lot of people are trying to get to a point, October, November.
So a state building permit expires after
I think it's 2 years.
2 years. It's 2 years. But could be coming to the end of that or something that they need to.
Santos?
Yeah.
Top of page 29, second line. If hand delivered to the person, should that be employer or employee of such person?
Top of 29?
Yeah. Second line.
Oh,
Such person.
I'm sorry, Chuck, what was your question?
The question is, should it read employer or employee?
basically, is this person the contractor?
Should be felt the employee.
Who's the person?
Yeah.
It's a notice of violation, so that should just be the person, because I think you can give it to an employer or similar to a subpoena, there's no.
Yeah, but I think what they were trying to do here is that you know who the homeowner is and you give them that service of notice violation, or the homeowners lives in Tulsa, they're not here, they hired somebody to be here, and that person on site gets this notice of violation.
So it should be employee.
No, I think it should be employer, and here's why. So let's say that the person, so if we go back to the end of the meeting, they're saying that the person is the person here is somebody who has committed a violation. An employee can't reasonably be expected to relay that violation to the homeowner. So like the contractor shouldn't reasonably be expected to hand that to the homeowner, but if the homeowner receives the violation, they could reasonably be expected to communicate that violation to the contractor.
Yeah, so it should be the person holding the encroachment permit, right? Either contractor or homeowner.
But don't we think that so if we're gonna issue some sort of violation to a contractor, do we not think that it's reasonable that in the absence of, if the contractor just leaves town, can we issue that violation to the homeowner? Seems reasonable. Because the contractor is acting on behalf of the
But
homeowner.
who owns who holds the permit?
Let's say that the contractor does, and the contractor leaves town. Can we instead issue a violation to the homeowner?
So this section is really about those instances where someone isn't. And they are littering in the public way, and they are putting equipment in the public way, and they're not plowing stuff. And so I don't know that it necessarily is matching to a permit, because I'm reading B, C, and D. You didn't pull a permit, right? So I can see the language of person, because it's open-ended. Is it a home builder, homeowner? I think what the question is I guess the other part is, I know in some instances when code compliance would actually say, here's your letter. You're on site, here it is, and they've got the body cam to say, here it is, I gave you the letter. And it's your contractor or it's the homeowner, and you've been notified.
Right.
And I think in some instances, we have a lot of property owners that don't even live in New Mexico, right? So, I don't recommend we drive to Helena to hand deliver a letter.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I guess the question is, it's in those instances where the contractor is doing work, probably told the homeowner, I got a permit, and we're like, you never got a permit. You got your stuff all over the road. What needs to be said to make sure we capture that? Is it employee, employer? I think this is really where, buddy, you didn't even get a permit. Oh, I needed one? Yeah, you did.
Well, what if we look at like contracted snow removal, just as an example? So we know what home the violation happens on. We don't necessarily know who was supposed to remove the snow. So maybe if we saw somebody, if we knew who was supposed to remove the snow and they didn't, we could issue a violation to that contractor. But if we didn't, we could still issue one to the homeowner rather than the contractor. So that would be the employer of the person who actually made the violation rather than, so it's not, so the employee would not be a bullier there, but employer would. Does that make sense?
Doesn't mean.
So maybe the line here should say, notice under this subsection is sufficient if hand delivered to the responsible party. Because if I'm a homeowner, I live in Tulsa, and I've hired a contractor to put an addition to my garage, and he spread everything out over the right of way.
In that case, you could argue that both parties are responsible.
Both parties are responsible for the contractor that needs to be
So
notified.
both are eligible to receive a violation.
So I've got, with your suggestion, notice under this subsection is sufficient if hand delivered to the responsible party of the violation. So it's contractor, it's
Or the party,
homeowner.
the party responsible for the violation.
Yeah. Then it could be homeowner or.
So flip it to the party responsible for violation.
Seems a little bit.
Well, it's more general.
Yes.
Yeah, Jim's.
Good catch, Chuck.
Okay, Santos, in that same paragraph, come down to the next line, you need to, strike the word clerk.
Yes, we
And
did.
then come down to paragraph 2, third line. Clerk,
I missed the clerk.
and then paragraph 3, second line, clerk.
There it is.
Missed the clerk again.
Yeah. We're clerk now.
Can't get rid of us.
I don't understand why the clerk was responsible for
I
that.
missed a.
The clerk's got a lot right now. So I'm gonna skip
It was
it.
prohibited. Unfortunately, I was reading through this, and because it says it's unlawful for any person to use a vehicle as described below on the rights of ways, that means I can't drive my motorhome to my house. Because I would be using my motorhome on the city right of way. So I suggested to say that any person to park or occupy overnight any vehicle or similar structure and so forth, all the rest of the things.
So are
You may tell me I'm
are you-
wrong, but
are you-
I just read it as that I can't drive my motorhome to my house on the city streets.
No.
When you cut out all the clauses and all, you get down to the 6-word sentence. Any person, it is unlawful for any person to use any vehicle on the right of way.
Where does it say motorhomes though? It says,
It says vehicles are similar to live-in with wheels as the foundation. That describes an RV.
where does it say that?
We don't want RVs parking on the street to
Right.
occupy them anyways.
So where does it say that you just said?
So the first sentence, the
The
word,
first sentence should be, instead of used, put park.
Where does it say what you said about the thing with wheels?
the next half of the sentence. So it's a portable structure having no foundation other than wheels or jacks and designed for. So
Occupancy.
That's that part right there.
Okay.
Not designed, as so designed to serve for a permanent occupancy. And so there was an RV that was parked at, after you came down the pass, there's a first meadow where you could actually pass people. There was a unit parked winter, yeah, and then it moved somewhere here. And it didn't stay long because of this provision and that's what they were doing. They just parked in the street.
That's right.
And they
Got
got
one of them parked in the street or occupied overnight. And it's upon the right of way. If there's a, upon on the public ways, it says public ways, so I said right of way.
I think what this is trying to do is that one instance that we had somebody move in, or I use air quotes, move in, they park, and then after 2 days, we're like, but you can't do this.
Can't do this. Can't live in my RV overnight.
Yeah, I think that's why it says use. But I also feel in instance that the word occupy kind of says that that's what
But it's an or, it's use or occupy use. So when I'm driving my vehicle, I'm using it.
And you're certainly operating it, which it says somewhere else.
so it could be unlawful for any person to occupy any vehicle or similar structure having no foundation. So drop the word use or,
It's a neat trick to drive it without occupying.
right? Well, but to occupy is, the assumption would be is you're not moving. Right?
I think you can, no, I think you can have an occupant in, well, not,
Just say-
okay, that's a good question.
Just change it to take out, use and put park or occupy.
Right. That's what I
So a slightly different angle to critique it, the subtitle of B is trailer coaches or mobile homes, but it isn't motor homes. So is this section intending to exclude motor homes?
So it goes back to the same thing as if I had a travel trailer. I can drive it into my driveway and use it in my driveway, but I can't use it on the public right of way.
So moving something is not necessarily using it. I agree that driving it is using and operating it. Moving it, if you're not in it, I don't think that that's using it. I think that's moving it so it can be used somewhere else. So I think if you exclude motorhomes from this, I think that
I
I think
want
the
to
rest
keep,
of B is appropriate.
I want to keep motorhomes.
I want to keep them all off the right of way.
I want to keep motorhomes there. I just want to, I think, substitute the word use with park.
Okay, if we wanted to apply to motorhomes, then the then the subtitle should say trailer coaches or.
That could be
motorhomes
that
or
too.
motorhomes.
Big and mobile.
Because motorhomes do not fall into either of those two categories.
Trailer coaches, RV, or mobile homes.
Yeah. And then further down in there, there's a place where it says habitation upon the public way, again, should be right of way.
What about side by sides? You got snowmobiles.
Side by side is kind of it's. I think the way this is specific just to snowmobiles. There's a bigger conversation going on about side by sides on their allowance and how to get down 434. I would recommend that we not touch that language until that's clarified. In fact, the village did a traffic study as part of that.
That's
Yeah, because DOT said, tell us what your traffic's like to see that they can be safe on 434. So I prefer, since that's ongoing, let's get that resolved before we bring it in. And we can always come back. I did not have any other recommendations up until page 41. And that was, the allowance of the village to remove snow. And this is at Kurt's direction, the way this is written, you had to have a significant snow event, accumulation of at least 4 inches within a 24-hour period. He thinks that we can get a significant snow event within 24 hours. And the way this is written, you gotta wait 24 hours for that snow event. So the idea is to strike it, to come up with better language, to really make sure that we aren't hindering ourselves when we get 4 inches in 2 hours, but we can't, it says we can't plow it until 24 hours. And I don't know what that language is yet, because I don't have wording from Kurt. And it may just be that last sentence needs to be tweaked, rather than the whole paragraph.
Well, I can tell you that it's not necessarily the snowfall in 24 hours, it's the wind blown snow. Same, that's where that stuff comes in. As soon as you build a berm on one side, it starts depositing across the road.
Not disagreeing with any of that, and I think that's what Kurt's looking for, is he wants that flexibility, if he's gotta go out sooner. How do we do that? I just don't have that language.
Why can't you just leave the first sentence there,
And
a significant snow event, and it's not defined, so they can decide.
Well, because when we originally did this, the village had no discretion to clear sidewalks from snow. And so we had to come up with a method that triggered the village being able to go out and clear snow from sidewalks. And so the idea from that council at that time was a significant snow event. What is that? So that's where we got the
So the
definition.
issue was they weren't clearing them when they should have been.
So if you read the rest of the snow removal section, the property owner adjacent to the sidewalk is responsible for clearing the snow. And so what was happening is they were not clearing the snow. Or they were clearing the snow and then the village was clearing the street and then it went right back on the sidewalk. And so there wasn't this uniformity of clearing the public right of way to keep it safe for pedestrians. So that's why this paragraph was added. So it's not like people weren't, there were some people that just wouldn't clear the snow off the sidewalk. We needed to have language to give the village authority to do it, and that's what it was. And so if the idea is, let's keep first sentence, and then, you know, if you want to take a stab at what a significant snow event is, we could do that in.
so can we just change it to the village of Bing's fire shall conduct snow and ice removal for all sidewalks and pedestrian passageways, abutting public right of ways in response to at least 4 inches of snow accumulation.
Whether it's wind blown, whether it's snowfall, whether it's another snowfall 4 hours from now,
Okay.
it's all covered.
And then accumulation of at least 4 inches of snow within the public right of way.
Sounds fine.
I had some ticky-tacky things on table 7A back on page 30. Just like, forget that when you're ready.
Table 7, what page is that?
How did we define arterial? I'm sorry, I missed that. How did we define arterial?
Okay, we did not,
Because it's gotta include the state highway as well as our own streets.
correct, we had not proposed
Okay,
definitions for that
I
yet.
got some ideas for that, but we'll get back to that later.
Okay,
So our streets, the categories that are designed arterial, not arterial one,
what page are you?
I'm on page 30.
Okay.
Arterial one, I don't, is one is a note, is that what that is? I guess that is, okay. Applies to minor arterials only, but we don't have minor arterials. We don't have a principal arterial. So note one becomes a real problem. Depending on how we define arterial. Then we don't have a street called local access, all we have is a street called local. We don't have a local volume, it's a low volume on the definition, so it shouldn't be local volume, it should be low volume. On the top heading of table 30. And so I guess all those other numbers that are scattered around in here that are hard, are really footnotes is what they are, okay?
Yeah, it looks like superscript got.
Yeah, got it. They're footnotes, got it. And then it goes back to how we defined our arterial. I'm looking at it that we said we want a 6-foot shoulder on arterials, but I think the village wants to put arterials in with curb and gutter, and why do we need a 6-foot shoulder once we have a curb and gutter? So,
I don't have any disagreement with any of these proposed amendments. I just think that,
it's outside of his scope. What do you want?
no, I just think from last week, the whole conversation of streets and roads by themselves, because there was also a conversation about putting a survey out, the public about streets and roads, that by itself should be a separate lengthier discussion.
It is, it's a huge discussion.
Because I think for right now, there's some direction as with respect to water conservation. And some of these heavier trucks on the road, how do we get some of that out? I just don't want this committee to feel that what we're talking about today is the only thing that we're ever gonna do in Title VII. I think it's the first step for Title VII to make the next step a little easier, because I think we could spend a lot more time.
Yeah,
And we need to. I think we need to spend a lot more time on the roads itself, the definitions, what is it, the
so then
profiles.
just the heading words would make sense to get it consistent within itself.
Yes,
So the correction would be strike the word on the top line, strike the word access under local, just make it local. So that's what our definition is. And change it to low volume on the next category, because that's what our definition is low volume. And then that's fine. The rest of it can be all, the rest of it's a longer discussion.
so I'm gonna go back really, really fast. Snow removal, Village of Edgefire shall conduct snow and ice removal for all sidewalks and pedestrian passageways with public right of ways. In response to at least 4-inch snow accumulation. A significant snow event, was that the idea, or just the next sentence was accumulation in public right of way? So the last part, accumulation of 4 inches in public right of way, what did that?
Because,
That was a separate sentence?
no, that was finishing the final sentence. But to me, it doesn't have to snow. It could be wind-driven snow that accumulates in the right of way that needs to be cleared.
So the last part of the sentence, at least 4-inch snow accumulation
The public right of way.
in the public right. Okay.
Significant snow event is, to me, very subjective.
It is, it is. Okay, so the last sentence is just dropped because this is gonna be one longer, one sentence that puts it all together.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I got it. I think the last section of chapter 1 is,
I got it, I'm on 42. Page 42.
okay,
Under design requirements, subsection B, we got to list major locals. We don't have any major locals. And then,
under B1,
I'm on 7157.
I know, page 42.
Well, I your pages go off of the page.
That's on
41.
Oh, it's on 41.
I'm sorry. Yeah, on 41. And then to bury your curb and gutter, it says all sorts of stuff like developing semi-urban areas and rural areas which are normally required of rural street section. I got lost in all that. But if you don't want to handle that right now and go back and get it later, that's fine, because I was just gonna tell you to write it as, we should, the village public works director shall require barrier curb and gutter as shown in table 7A. If 7A doesn't currently show when to use curb and gutter. So,
That's right.
defer it later.
Okay, all right,
Right.
okay.
Then again, on line 44, we got principal arterials and minor arterials. You want to fix that one?
No, I think what we were doing is, that would be with our conversations on streets and roads.
Okay,
We'll capture all of that
Got it.
together.
Got it.
The only thing that we had proposed is on page 48, under lightage, just the striking of, on all other streets, 100-watt high-pressure sodium vapor lights are required, striking that.
right?
And then below that, there was a reference to a $25 fee, struck that as established by resolution. I think there was a question you had on the
Yeah.
lighting about all major intersections.
Yeah.
Does the village
It
really
says all
want-
major, doesn't it?
It says all major intersections.
Okay, so that's undefined what that is, so that's fine. So you're not requiring it throughout the neighborhoods.
I don't think we want it to
I
find
don't think
in all the
No, we
neighborhoods. I know we didn't want high pressure sodium vapor to begin with, but if you continue that sentence, it says located at all major intersections. So I know North Angel Fire Road, 434, there's lightage. Country Club entrance, there's lightage. I'm not so sure where Baptist Church and South Angel Fire Road is. I don't know if there's any lighting at that intersection. I didn't think so.
Just a block camera.
And then going north, you've got streetlights that DOT has put in 434 going all the way to the blinking light. But that's really, and then as you go up North Angel Fire Road, the village does have intersection lights that like Vale, going up the mountain. I don't, it maybe one block to the east or to the south, actually, going down Vale. I don't know.
It just goes back to, as we go spend money to improve streets within the community, we're gonna have to put a light in this section set of lights. And so we have to, when we get to that point, we gotta make sure we're balanced with what we want.
And just on that point, so the Night Sky Committee actually has a recommendations coming this Thursday to planning and zoning for consideration. That talks about those streetlights and trying to be in compliance with the night sky ordinance. And in fact, the village has already looked at those streetlights on North Angel Fire Road. They did a cost estimate, it's like $60,000 to change those out over as they are being phased for upgrades or bulbs go out, to bring those into compliance with the proposed new ordinance too. So I think we're gonna mirror each other with this paragraph with Title IX items. So the only other thing was on page 51, with the section of culverts, adding that language on the vertical slope. But I think we said property instead of vertical slope.
Sorry, driveways.
Driveway. So we were just making it consistent.
I'm sorry, to go back again, looking at section fences, walls, and footings, encroachments. Under certain situations, it looks like we can allow a wall in the public right of way. I was suggesting that we add the sentence, any wall installed in the public right of way must be designed by a PE registered in New Mexico.
What paragraph are you in?
71512 fences, walls, footings.
I see that section of each paragraph.
Second paragraph. We would become the second sentence. Approved by the village public works director, but just, we don't want anybody to go out and put a wall that's not designed by a PE in the right of way.
So any encroachment must be applied for from the village public works director with an encroachment agreement, comma, and approved by,
I was up right before that, any encroachment, I was up right before that, but insert after the first public works director.
approved by village public works director and designed by a New Mexico engineer.
Yep. There's too much liability otherwise.
Okay. Any thoughts on that? Does that seem okay?
And then, I'm sorry again, I got one more on 71513 barricades at the end of pavement. I thought at the last, right at the end of what we currently have written, you should write, a temporary turnaround is required at all barrier locations, barricade locations.
So that would be a new sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you put that?
At the end, the very last thing under that section, a temporary turnaround is required at all barricade locations. Make any sense?
Yes, it does.
Let the fire department turn around if they run into a barricade.
Exactly. Required at all temporary. A temporary turnaround is required at all
Barricade location.
barricade locations. Got it.
Right. Easy. What if the barricade happens right at the edge of an intersection? There wouldn't require a turnaround. Right?
Yeah, because you created a future driveway, you're saying.
But I'm saying, it's in a,
It essentially is a turnaround by itself.
I don't think it technically fits the definition of a turnaround. It's a
You're right. I hear what you're saying.
But. For example, if like one of what is effectively a city block, you know, was blocked off on either end, you need to effectively make that street no longer exist. So you have a T on either end rather than cutting through.
Okay, then that has to put as approved by the director.
Sure. Okay.
And then. Can you give me a few seconds on when are detention ponds required in the village? Because I don't see it in this section, anything is saying when they're required. We have a section about what you design.
So
detention
there's,
ponds for.
in our subdivision ordinances, as you go to develop property.
Gotcha.
You have that, so like the property between Zeb's and True Value, as they came in for their development, they had to identify where they were gonna have detention. And they were able to identify that. When the village did the workforce housing behind it, they also did a drainage study
Okay,
with
so
their grading
where is
plan.
the criteria elsewhere?
It's in Title 10, yeah, in our subdivision sections, so.
Because I was interested, it's giving you design criteria for the detention pond here. When it's
Yeah.
really in Title 10, right?
I think there's more language in Title 10 in some instances.
Sure, but it's not-
The grading and drainage,
Here.
not here, yes.
Just a thought. Okay, go on. That's a bigger discussion probably.
So again, on page 51, we just, with a suggestion that it's the driveway slope greater than the road profile. Page 52, because of the lettering, so we added the letter D to talk about transverse culverts. So D became E, subtable 7F became 7E, E became F became G, and so on. We added a number 1 that talked about the minimum diameter for culverts, for transverse drop culverts. And then a letter J, which talked about earlier, the village has the right to clear sediment when considered necessary by Public Works.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I had on that is if you're gonna be charged for that.
That's right.
That
That the village council may determine a fee, it's fee for service, by resolution.
So when a road grader pushes dirt into a culvert and then we build a property.
So that's not kind of where, if we're not gonna charge them, that's fine, then I don't think we need to do anything. Right, my point is, if we are gonna charge the owners because of it, they should, before the village goes and clears it, they should be given some warning to do it on.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that you were suggesting that. I'm just saying that scenario is going to happen. So however we word this, it seems like we should probably consider that scenario.
To allow them to clear it if they mess it up.
Well, how do we think is the right way to deal with that? So let's say that we write something where a road grader can come by, push a bunch of stuff into your culvert and then bill you for it. Does that feel right? Or should we include verbiage that?
I don't know that it's going in the, I know it's going in the water ditch.
If it goes in the ditch 30
I
feet,
just dug one out yesterday.
30 feet upstream of the culvert, and then we get some monsoons and now it's in the culvert 2 weeks later. Is that fair? Is that something that we want to say, yep, that might happen, or is that something where we want to write something to accommodate?
Well, and maybe the theory is that it's never charged back to the owners, they're assuming that it's, you know, that
Honestly, I think what we could do is we could propose a fee. That the council wants to keep the fee, okay, and let them determine what it is. Or they, just like you said, maybe we shouldn't charge. But at least we broach the subject for them to consider next week. That in this event where you've got to clear out this culvert, is it all, and it may or not be because of greater work, it may just be because it's just, they just never cleaned it out. So, yes, so I suggest we keep some of this proposed language about a fee and a resolution. And if that's how you want to forward it to council for consideration, that's completely fair. And let that conversation happen at that level. And I think that's it for chapter 1.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
Not that you need to take it hard at all, but the design section, the general design criteria. To me, there's a ton of design criteria that applies to different areas and it needs to be engineered, not pulled up of a table in here.
Don't disagree with any of that.
So it's, to me, this section is almost, could just say needs to be designed by an engineer to the Mexico Department of Transportation or something similar to that.
Don't disagree with that.
I can see some stuff in here that's.
And the village has an engineer on retainer for these types of services to review these types of plans. So it's well within our boundaries to say it's got to be designed by a New Mexico engineer. And we've got, well, someone on staff to review it. But I think that the design standards also goes back to what are we classifying as different types of roads? And those profiles, things there.
So my thing is that the state, the DOT changes their requirements.
Well, and I think you're right. I think what we could do is you'll notice in some sections where it said, or like the whether or not a traffic management plan is required for an individual property per the state manual. I think we could, that language says per the current state manual access, right? We could have comparable language in these design standards per most current approved, adopted, ordinance or manual for the state of New Mexico.
Well, I guess that's my thing is that if you're gonna do that, why not just refer to that manual instead of putting it all in here? Because they could go through all of this, okay, we're gonna do a 200-foot sight line when the DOT has just changed it to 250 feet, you know, then they have to change their homes. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't see this information.
I don't disagree with that. If there's another standard that kind of preempts the local, then let's just revert back
So
to.
you can't build a road in the state, not meeting the state requirements.
Right.
The village can build any road they want to build outside of this public right of, I don't know if they say right of way.
I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true,
I don't think
because
It's gotta be designed,
I built roads at the mine
okay,
on private property that had to meet the state.
state criteria and specifications.
Yeah, so that was kind of driven by the EPA.
Never run into that in Texas.
It was driven by the EPA saying that all the roads have to be
Using by
safe.
EPA, okay, gotcha.
But still,
I don't disagree with that. Some of the proposed amendments, I think should just, how do we make it easier? And if that's something, I really feel that going through those design standards is, that's like 2 meetings by itself.
yeah, no, I agree. That's why I was
No, and I think.
hesitant to bring it up, but to me, it's like, well, number one is I'm definitely opposed to changing the definition of the road classifications, because if we do talk to the DOT or to the state, we need to be on what an arterial is, and it's defined as, you know, 500 plus.
Yes,
So our criteria, we should have like two two, maybe three road classifications here. And I do think one should be a relief route, you know? And those are our primary roads, is the relief routes.
Totally agree. I still don't understand why we took all minor arterial language out of code.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't understand, but yes. Mr. Chairman, your next three sections are relatively lighter than this.
Yes, that's not.
So, roadway encroachments, I think what we'll do is the language that we had on substantial completion that we just saw in chapter 1, we'll match it here in chapter 2. Permit, when is it required? We added for lot access. That's the idea. You need to get trucks in to clear and grade, you need this permit. Kurt wanted better language on that security deposit for culverts. So we've added this language based on his preferred timelines. That's really all that on page 3 is about. Folks asking when they're gonna get their bond back.
We did change the wording on that because we had something rather than it was based on the substantial completion. It was the actual, with the exact wording.
So I'll look at that substantial completion and substitute that out.
Final approval inspection. Acceptance. Final inspection.
Another nitpicky question, instead of saying we need an encroachment permit for access, should we say access with the vehicle? Because if somebody's accessing it on foot, you know, they're blocking the property, and they want to design a structure for it, or if they're staking something out.
So we'll say vehicular lot access.
Just a question, yeah. Well, so, okay, access with a vehicle, vehicular access.
I think
Way out
vehicular,
of context, you could say that that meant accessing the vehicle rather than accessing the vehicle.
oh no, vehicular lot access.
Then that's, you could say that. I think most people would interpret that, I think the clearest way to say it would be that accessing a lot with a vehicle, or simply access with a vehicle, rather than vehicular access. If it was-
Lot access. Lot access with vehicles. Page 3, the substantial completion language to match the final language that we had in chapter 1.
On page 3, just real quick, ticky tack is in, we don't have a telephone company to speak of anymore on item C at the very top. If it just said electric power company and other utilities that holding a franchise agreement.
So technically, I think central,
Whoever holds a franchise agreement gets the ability to have an exemption.
So is there?
power company and other public, and other private utilities.
What about a telecom company? Because
If they have a franchise agreement, they can use this paragraph of emergency exemption.
So the electric power company and other private utilities holding franchise agreements with the village are exempt from this provision.
Yeah, in emergency situations for public health, safety, or the rest of it.
Okay.
is that true? Do they all have to have a franchise agreement with the municipality?
Yes.
Yes, okay, yes, got it.
And I think all of them do. The last one, well, no, it's not the last one. So on page 4, we talk about letter D deposit formulas, security deposits. There's a calculation of cubic foot for paved roads, for excavated materials, gravel roads. Number 7, driveway installation established by resolution.
I'd recommend you add another one, 8 walls, because we have the allowed encroachments of walls.
Walls established by resolution. The next section will really strikes of the optional water meter for installation. That whole section is just coming out, and then the last one is just penalties per established resolution for each case. So that just mirrors the other provisions.
So that, I know we talked a little bit about the water meter installation, right? But does it make sense to have it worded for, in case it ever has to happen again, instead of removing it completely, have, you know, unless otherwise stated, it's at the water department here or something, rather than just removing it, and all of a sudden, a year from now, they don't have enough people to keep up with it, and we need to go external again.
Yes and no. So the village is taking the initiative to upgrade every water meter. in the village. So I think we're down to how many, do you remember, Chuck, that was it?
Small number.
Yeah, so originally it was like over 2,000 water meters that were in our network. And we have swapped those out for the new remote sensing. And so part of that is we are already, as the village, doing all these meter installations for new. And that in doing that, we've been ordering more meters, not just for the service upgrades, but for new construction too. So I think because we didn't have a winter, a really light winter, we didn't lose time to get those installs for 6 months. So they've been continuing for pretty much year round. So I think that's more likely in line with why this section was to be removed. That most of these meters have now been upgraded. The village has ordered the remainder that need to be installed, and they've got an order for the new builds. I think we're gonna be good for a while. And
Well, that's the thing, that's kind of where, for a while,
yeah,
right? That's where it's, if you remove it from here completely, then you've got to go back through all of this again.
if you wanted to keep it, what was the language that you had preferred? Because I think it would be a sentence at the very top, at the very beginning.
Determined by the director.
Yeah.
Optional water meter installations is only determined by the director. I mean, he's the only one that has the authority to.
Yeah.
So requirements for contractors to install their own water meters shall be considered and approved by the works director.
Yes. That keeps it open.
So. So the violation penalties, any person, firm, or corporation violating any portion of this chapter is guilty of a misdemeanor. Not guilty until you get your day in court, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How you gonna word that?
Upon receiving a conviction thereof. I think you're right. I think what that does is give discretion to the municipal judge of what they can assess. But you're right, the next parenthetic phrase.
Subject to being charged with a misdemeanor.
Charged with misdemeanor.
Yeah, because there could be extenuating circumstances. As to why you violate something in here that.
Subject to what?
Being charged with a misdemeanor.
One of the things going back to 728 on I, if we're gonna kind of bring it back in, I'm probably want to change the $250 to whatever set by the.
Yeah,
It's just a recommendation. All of it.
any other notes on chapter 2? Chapter 3, I know the manager had asked, in particular, well, there's some suggestions that we're proposing, but in addition, we had, at that time that this got sent out to you, had not made any recommendations on the water conservations level 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think we need to talk about that. So, I'm gonna try to move as quickly as I can up to that point so we can have some more time on that part. On page 2, the deposits, And it's really just established by resolution and striking the fees. 734, adding the allowance for a bulk water usage for metered service. Letter A, number one, we talked about irrigation meters, and I think we're at a point where we would prefer language that says irrigation meters are only permitted in an 03, 4, 5, is there a 6? There, and 03, 4, 5 is the golf course, Girl Scout Ranch, it's the ski mountain. So that we don't have irrigation meters on any other commercial property, on any other single-family residential. And I think that goes into this water conservation standards as well, is that we already have provisions in the resolution when we annexed the golf course and the ski mountain, that they have an allotment for irrigation and snow making. Don't want to disturb that. We feel that it is a potential that at Allen Fields, we may need an irrigation meter as we have the new master plan for Allen Fields being discussed. Okay, so, and it may be the Girl Scouts might need an irrigation meter on their property. They haven't had one, but they might. But what that does is it really limits the areas of the village where you would have that irrigation service.
So I wrote it as a separate irrigation meter. Well, is not required unless there is no other water use on the property. So if the homeowners association wants to go out and water something, they can get an irrigation meter because there's no other use. The ski lift has no other use but to ski, there's nobody living there. So I wrote it as, if there's no other use, you can't get an irrigation meter.
Saying that something isn't required is not the same as saying that, saying that something isn't required is not the same as saying that it is prohibited.
Well, that's changed it around, but the whole, my point was, irrigation, I meant to say irrigation meters are prohibited unless there is some other use.
And another quick point of context, presently, we don't allow irrigation meters as the only meter on a lot. It's only as a secondary.
So Frontier Park and Olympic Park wouldn't be enough volume to warrant one
So Olympic Park, I think, is covered as a part of the golf course.
golf course.
Yes, so that's an 02, 03. I'm not quite sure what the zoning is on Frontier Park. Frontier Park might be a C. So what we could do is we could say 03, which is golf course, 04, which is Girl Scout. And I think 03 is golf course and elements. 04 would be Girl Scouts, 05 would be ski resort and Frontier Park. You know, we could say it that way. And here's part of the other reason why, and I think this ties in really fast with water conservation, is we don't meter this. People are getting irrigation meters and there's no meter rate for it. And so people are pulling a domestic meter for their home, then they're pulling another meter for their lawn, and we are not with a rate system on that separate irrigation meter. And so that's where the initial conversation was just prohibited. Period. But then we realized if you go that extreme, we have acknowledgements for resort's ability to irrigate golf course, the ski resort, Olympic Park. So we don't want to prohibit that. We need to meet those obligations. So that's why the idea was only allowed in the 3, 4, 5 and Frontier Park. And that's it.
How do you determine the wastewater bill?
So that's based on usage. There's an actual
One
calculation.
meter through a certain period of.
So there's a minimum, it's just like your water bill. There's a minimum charge, and once you exceed that gallon minimum, then there's this rate kicks in. So it's the same on sewer and water. There's a minimum balance that you're charged for, and then if you use more, then you're.
So if they're using it on their grass, they're paying wastewater for it too.
I don't know about wastewater, because it's just Floyd, they're using their domestic meter.
But you only have a water meter. So how are you determining wastewater usage? Only by the water meter. So if you're irrigating anything outside the house, they're paying wastewater for that water they irrigate. Okay, fair enough. Good. That's good for the city.
Does everybody feel okay limiting it to those O districts that are really recreational plus Frontier Park?
Yeah.
So 01, by the way.
It's 01. So what we're gonna do is name it. So it's 0345 plus Frontier Park.
Yeah,
Or there's,
or we could rezone it.
I don't want to rezone it.
Okay.
But it's 03, 04, 05 plus Frontier Park.
And then what ends up happening with people that already have a separate meter for water? There's only one.
That we know of.
Yeah.
We think the number is less than 5. So what we're trying to do is get ahead. And I think this really clears it up. Again, as you look at these water conservations, this makes a lot of sense. So
Under your bulk water paragraph, 1,000 gallons over a 30-day period, is that what that is?
So my understanding is when you come for bulk water, you hook up your truck
And you get your bulk water.
and you get your bulk water.
So it's not over.
So it's not over a period, it's per incident.
And we don't require temporary meters to be put on the hydrant because we're filling a fixed volume truck that's being paid for.
So really quick, really quick. Right above that, fire suppression systems. We're only gonna charge it when it's actually in use. And then second, bulk water, I think what you'll see is those water tank trucks. There's supposed to be a designated bulk water hydrant where they hook up. What we have discovered is that there are other people hooking up to our hydrants. Contractors.
Yes.
Who were concrete work, and the folks that did all the road work in the past, the last 4 years, 64, they were hooking up to the hydrant, they were doing logs, how many gallons, so we could assess a fee. We have a bulk water rate, but we also have some contractors that were just hooking up, not logging it. So that's why the last sentence is in there, that unauthorized access. The council can set whatever that fee is, accordingly. So part of this is to catch up with some of the practices. Thank you.
That a misdemeanor?
Yeah. Subject to.
Yeah.
It's
not acceptable.
So for the next 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, it's really about removing a set fee and saying per, resolution. As you get to page 8, we talk about diversion of water, unauthorized access to water meters, mains, hydrants is prohibited. Village employees are the only authorized personnel. So, what are you doing? I'm hooking up, I'm bulk water. Whoa, what? We opened that for you. What, how much? Oh, well, this is my 3rd trip today. Oh, is it? Okay, great. So having this language is a way for us to capture those moments where we know an individual or company is pulling water and we did not authorize.
Some communities require contractors to get a temporary meter on a hydrant. So that they can measure it.
Well, I do know that, there was a mechanism to log off of this hydrant when the fire hit. Station 2 was a designated, setup for all the fire personnel to draw water. So I think it was measured pretty quickly. How many trucks did you fill?
Yeah.
And you got a gallon.
But I mean, like this everyday contractor
Yeah.
that's using water all the time.
So, I think there's a way to measure it. It's just we needed more teeth. That we need to be the authorized agent to open up that service.
Back on page 7.
Yep.
On the top of the page, item 1. I will say the next CPI adjustment will be done effective on July 1st, 2003. That just means removed. That makes any sense.
Just that whole sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not 2003. So as we get into the next section is the water conservation. I just want to start with, if you look on page 11, oh my gosh, you had to put an announcement in the newspaper with local circulation. You don't have that anymore. But now there's more digital options and alerts. We've got this message board here in front of Village Hall. So that's why these provisions were put into place. The number 3 of 3 prominent locations that kind of mirrors what the village clerk had been doing, posting agendas in front of Village Hall, sometimes at, Maverick, oh, it's not Maverick, Rockies, and then we would post it at the post office under the community board. So rather than putting 7, because we didn't have these digital options for people to get alerts or to see it on the digital board, that's why the number came down. Is that we're gonna have it right here on the highway for everyone to see. It's gonna be on the website now as an alert, and there's probably, you may have received the emails or the text alerts that, hey, we're in a water conservation level, whatever. That was the rationale to go from 7 to 3. And by all means, striking all reference that we have to put it within the local newspaper within 24 hours. And there again, we don't have a daily newspaper anymore. So with that,
So,
yeah,
I'm sorry, one of the things the, manager wanted was to address pressure washing.
yes,
And so one of the ways I was thinking about doing that was changing the definition of, on page 9, changing the definition of cleaning outdoor hard surfaces. So that it would read exactly as it is, but then it would exclude when that work is an incidental part of other work at that property.
okay,
That was my idea, just to say that if the washing was incidental to his work to stain the driveway, then it doesn't count as outdoor water or cleaning outdoor hard surfaces. If it was part of what his work to stain the deck, you know, he had to pressure wash the deck to stain the deck. But if you're just gonna stain the deck for cosmetic purposes, I mean, you're just gonna pressure wash the deck for cosmetic purposes, then this is what it's called for.
so at the end of, or other outdoor services, instead of a period, comma, unless incidental with permitted work on property.
There you go.
Yes.
All right,
I
so,
like the permitted work, great.
so I
And you
think,
could say such as painting, staining, sealing, whatever,
Yeah,
if you wanted to say that.
because that affects a contractor that's in painting and they need to do that.
yes, and so that's why I think, if we tie it back to some type of
I
permit,
love that.
then that would be exempt.
You know, unless such cleaning is incidental to other permitted work on the property.
So just a quick observation, 7.3.10, you have a definitions portions, and in every other chapter, we have the definitions at the beginning. Why don't we have the definitions at the beginning?
Chapter 3.
Chapter, yeah.
So we could just take that letter B and just shove it in front.
This makes it consistent.
And if you had to add any other definitions in here.
I think that would be determined on what you're about to discuss on water conservation. If you feel that there's clarity that needs to be added and we need to define a term, that makes total sense. If we need to revise like we just did on what cleaning outdoor surfaces means, we could do that. So I think, the direction of the manager was really looking at these levels of what should be and what shouldn't be. What triggers a level and going on that is really, I think, the next part of this conversation, so. The only thing that we have with respect from the staff idea was the posting and the proclamations. I think part of this, there was a section where you had to physically put a flag outside of the fire station or something. That it had to be in a pot by the door. I mean, you can still do that. That's how I read it, right?
So what about, people that are within the village but are on well water?
Two things. If you're within the village and you have access to public water, you shall connect to public water. And your well is limited to irrigation. That's the way the rest of the ordinance reads. Now, there are streets, like parts of Ellie Parker, or Ottawa Road, where there's no water. It's all wells. Yes, Halo Pines are true. Yeah, exactly. So, but in those instances, that's your well, that this is really for the public system. and access to the public system. So
I think it says that.
sorry.
I think it says that.
Yeah, so I think if you've got, what I'm saying is, I don't think there should be an instance where you have public water and a well. I think if you have public water and a well, that well is limited for service for that property that does not include domestic use.
Right.
Or,
Well, what I'm used to is, typically requiring the people on a well to designate that they're on a well, so that they're not.
It would be well advised if we're signing, if they're gonna go out and irrigate their ground and go pressure wash everything while on, well, villages on restrictions through their well water, they'd be well advised to alert the public.
Yeah, well, so it's typically in other places where I lived, it's kind of required to just to designate that they're on well water. And that's why, it's just so you don't get people knocking on the doors saying, hey, yeah, water restriction.
so where we,
Right here, that.
where should we put that? I'm suggesting it should go somewhere near the top.
Yeah, well, what I would say is that people within the village that are on well water should make every effort to, follow the restrictions, because wells run dry too.
Well, right, and that's what I was gonna say is, do we also wanna consider that when we don't have very much water, trying to people on wells not deplete the aquifer so that their neighbors wells don't run dry, that'd be a considerate way to treat each other, small community.
So the purpose of the section, which is the first line, says the village water system. And we want to continue with that and says that for those operating an on-site well for outdoor use, we would recommend that they follow the following,
It's not just for outside use.
well, yeah, realistic. They should follow the following,
Yeah, so.
but post something that they are a well.
Well, isn't aquifer part of a water system? I think you can make the argument that it is.
You're stretching that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's,
It's not part of infrastructure, but a system is not defined as only including
Yeah,
infrastructure.
but then you're getting into the office of the state engineers. From there and.
Water rights and
Water.
landowner rights.
I mean,
so I like where this is going, and I think we're at the right spot. It should go with the very first sentence, very first under the purpose. And right now I've got property serviced by domestic wells, comma, it is recommended they
Follow the following,
follow the water conservation section
follow
of this
the water
chapter.
conservation. Follow a conservation.
I mean, a good example is the guy just up the street from me has horses and livestock. He uses a lot of water, I can tell you,
Mhm.
and all the bears are there drinking.
Did you want to say anything else except that it's recommended that they follow conservation section of this chapter?
You want to post notice that they're on a well?
That would be their own, I mean, I don't think we can.
Okay, we won't restrict it, we don't say anything.
Okay, probably tell them that we need to do that.
That, it'd be another file.
It's just about anywhere, but
But
it's.
some,
I think we have an idea from the village perspective of who's on a well, based on the street that we know we don't have public service on. I think Halo Pines stops at the police station. Everybody else down the road is on a well. Agua, everyone's on a well. Elliott Barker Parts is on a well. Yeah. Westridge, I believe there's wells of service on there. That's about it. Everybody else is in,
Sage.
Sage has portions are connected. The Grand is connected. Grand gets its water. There's a cul-de-sac to the south and with a green belt. And they came through that vacant lot to tie into the Grand, and then they came down the street below the Grand. I forget what it is, but the one that takes you to the yellow building. So Sage has some public service, and then there are some that are on wells.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it would just be a recommendation, because they don't really
That's true.
require them.
I thought I saw something about a physical flag. Maybe I just. But with respect to I think level one is just a voluntary option. Start getting it. Once you hit level two, then that's where a lot of these restrictions start coming in. I think, are there,
So do we have any, there's no restrictions on the amounts of irrigation for any level, right? I mean, right now, we're not under water conservation.
we are.
If we're not under a restriction, they can water every day of the week.
True.
So I would think that even on level one, we go to some high number, like 3 days a week or limited to 3 days a week. Just to get the process started. On a green flag, when you've determined it's a green flag, level one, it's a maximum of 3 days a week because level blue flag, level two is 2 days a week. Just so we start the people thinking that we're heading towards a problem that we need to be conscious of. That would, just my thought.
The current situation, we just went straight to level two, didn't we? There was no level one.
Yeah, there was no one. So what I'm hearing you say is that for level one, that, it's voluntary, but that residential properties are limited to outdoor irrigation 3 days a week?
Yeah, if we don't want to make it a restriction, it's a recommendation that they do 3 days a week voluntarily.
It should probably be the 3 days a week as well as kind of what we've got here, where there's a certain amount of time, right? So they're make sure they're doing it from 6 AM to 10 AM and 6 PM to 10 PM, consistent with that.
Yep. Between 6 and 10.
I just wanted to start the process, but you're right, so it's not going straight to blue.
So we'll add that recommendation for residential properties, 3 days a week, 6 to 10 AM and PM.
Or commercial too. All properties, commercial and residential go to, we don't want them watering their bushes every week, every day.
Commercial and residential property. Level two. Now you're down to 2.
Yeah, I came down to planting of new sod and turf is not recommended. Okay, yes, never mind. Because we'll get off with the blue flag, when we get to cooler temperatures, we'll get off the blue flag anyway, so never mind. I just said to the cooler temperatures.
So 2, we now step, based on your address, what days you get, twice a week. We've got these other recommended activities not to allow. Vehicle washing is discouraged and prohibited for fundraising events. Was there anything else you felt needed to be added? We need a number 7.
Well, it seems like we should have, like with the bulk water and then the sales that they have that are the non-residential sales. Seems like if you're gonna tell residents that they can't use the water, you shouldn't be selling it to non-residents.
So 7 would be bulk water.
Yeah, usage, and then there's the other thing, I guess they do some retail sales of the water as well, I thought.
That's all in bulk.
It's all bulk, okay, yeah. So I would just, it seems like we should be,
Yeah, 50% reduction
or honestly, I'd say if people are coming here to get their water, they can go someplace else and get it if we've got the water restrictions on it. So maybe that's a little bit stronger.
Maybe we started with a percentage reduction, but I don't have a measure, but
Yeah, that's good.
And then the next one is none.
So
we're trying to get gradation.
So kind of where I'm going is we already say in level 2, 2 days a week based on your address. With number 7, we could say bulk water sales are restricted to 2 days a week as determined by the public works director. So it's still allowed, but it's not 5 or 7 days a
Well,
week.
we know it's the other days that aren't mentioned.
Sorry.
We know it's the other days that aren't mentioned. We have Thursdays and Sundays and we can only sell bulk water in the days we're allowing irrigation. We're not allowing irrigation, whatever it is, what's with it.
But maybe there's something too where the public works director can, because there's no cap on how much they can take now either. So maybe they can cap how much can be taken rather than unlimited.
So limited to 2 days a week. And amounts determined by the public works director.
Yeah, it's like Mondays and Fridays is
Restricted to 2 days a week and amounts.
Previously, we had, it's capped at $1,000 per haul, but not 1,000, or sorry, 1,000 gallons per visit, but not per day. Maybe you only get to visit once on that day, so.
I think we'll present this to council as a recommendation on how they want to revise it. It's up to them, but I think you're right, getting something related to bulk water makes total sense to do. Because now we've added that as something we can meter, should meter. Bulk water usage is restricted to 2 days a week at amounts determined by the Public Works Director. Was there another activity for number 8? Or 7 right now seems okay.
I think we just need to make sure that that carries through as well to yellow flag and then
That,
yes,
yeah, okay,
goes all the way through.
easy enough. Level 3. You go from 2 to 1. And I think bulk water to the mirror is now down to 1. So that's all consistent.
And the other question comes up is, and it's up to the water director, what he wants to do, what's the best for his system? Because we have right now, even and odd, right?
Yeah.
You could go to 0, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, depending on how the addresses are spread out across the community, and spread out the water over more days, like 6 days of the week could be used, depending on what he wants to use, what's best for his system.
Are we talking about bulk water or?
No, irrigation, or just one way irrigation water. From there, 1 day a week, is it? Is it
Everybody
good enough?
does it all on the same day.
Yeah, everybody that's on an even number could do it all in the same day and drain the tank. That's, and the question is whether the director wants to spread it out over 6 days a week instead of 4 days a week.
What I'll do, because it's specific that it's a Saturday and Sunday, right? 1 day, is that, there's a recommendation for more discretion to the Public Works Director on the actual days of service.
Or is it, right, is it better for them to have the water, the irrigation of 1 day a week spread out over more days of the week? And it would be read like something like addresses ending in 0 and 1 are Monday, 2s and 3s are ending in Tuesdays, and ending in 4 and 5 are Thursdays, and 6s and 7s are Fridays, 8s and 9s are Saturday. You can use the ending number on the address depending on how the system I came from. Then they did a study of how many houses ended in all those addresses. You find out there's a lot more 1s and 0s than there are other numbers. And then we split 1 and 0 to different days, so that you wouldn't have it coming up.
We just have to, it's a general recommendation that on level 3, that there's discretion to the Public Works Director for actual days of restrictions based on the numerical ending of your address.
Right. 2.
1s and 2s, 3s and 5s, 6 through 8,
Whatever.
9s and 0s.
Just so it spreads it out, spreads the demand out on his system.
I'd almost leave it so he can do it any way he wants, doesn't even have to be numerical, maybe it can be subdivisions, or maybe something like that's easier than trying to go.
Yeah, but numbers, the address are such an easy one for everybody to understand.
Everybody with an engineer brain.
I was gonna say,
When we're considering, when we're designing some system to follow, we should consider that not everybody, most brains are not engineer brains, so there's a limit to a complexity of something in writing that people can and certainly will follow.
I don't know the subdivision, I don't know what section it's in.
I have to look at my address, so.
You have to look up your address, no, that's.
So that kind of, if you're gonna do it that way, you need to put it in here so people look it up.
No, I agree. I
Just leaving it to the discretion, because then he could say, okay, this week it's 0, 0 and 2.
It's got to be written down.
So what we could do is if you look at the next section on the proclamation, we could have language and shall be included in the at the level 2 or what level 1? Level 3 proclamation. So when the notice goes out, hey, we're at level 3, And if your address is a 1 or 2, you can only water on Mondays.
Yeah.
If, you know, if we say that whatever day it is, or subdivision, or west side of town, east side of town, however it gets defined, that is included in the proclamation.
That's a great idea. And then, item number 7 under C, the yellow flag, was the restaurants only serve water upon request.
Yes,
That wasn't listed in there, I don't think. I added that, under C, low.
so that's number 8.
Yeah, where, yeah.
Or is that it? It's not there, it's not there. So remember the.
Under
man
yellow
talked
flag.
about
Under yellow flag,
That if,
restaurants would only serve water upon request.
So we're adding a number 8 under, level 3.
If the restaurants only do it on request, why doesn't it make more sense just to make that the standard? Rather than even if we're under anything, so trying to keep up with that in the.
So just like we have bulk water on level 2 and 3, that we just, levels 2, 3, 4. Water services restaurant is on request only. Says that,
I'd almost start that with the green, and that's.
I think another reason why not make that the standard though, is we are heavily dependent on tourism, and specifically, it's tourism that is in more affluent market sectors like skiing and golf, not sitting on a beach drinking. And that at certain levels of affluency, there are certain standards of service that people, especially in America, expect. So we want them as tourists to feel like they have a certain amount of a luxurious experience, I think.
well, but I think that's what he's saying though, is that if you want water, you can get it. It's just the complimentary water is not recommended during these.
So if you look at travel vlogs and things like that, there are a lot of people there are a lot of Americans who are off-put by the fact that in some countries they have to ask and it's not just served to them. They equate that to their service. I don't think that we want to, when we have plenty of water or when we have enough water, we want to sacrifice.
Well, the water service in a restaurant is important to people. It's extremely important to people, and it's commented on if they're not given water immediately. Especially like Marcus said in this area. But the other side of that too is that I don't think that's a significant savings.
That's a good point.
That's, I mean, pressure washing your deck uses a lot more water than. You know,
All I know is that the manager wanted this to be considered.
okay.
And so I think at your discretion.
Under level C was far enough buried down.
So if you don't want to have it levels at 1 or 1 and 2, but if we get to 3, that. So 3 is,
Level 3 is fine.
is the yellow flag.
That's where it's
That's where we start prohibiting things.
prohibiting things, yes. And then it makes sense, right?
We're in trouble.
Yes, we're in trouble.
When we get down here, we're in trouble. We can see it.
So because in level 3, things are prohibited. Are we saying that water service at restaurants is prohibited or on request?
On request.
It can't be prohibited because people would.
People come
You
here,
don't want to.
people already come here, get out.
Buy bottled water now.
I don't think you can legally prohibit water anyway. I know some states require you, you have to give it at least upon request.
Just wanted to make sure. I put it as only upon request.
And that was one thing Mark did bring up about educate the restaurants to ask if they want water versus just automatically putting it there.
Right, but we're only saying at a level 3 yellow flag, that's when it becomes an issue.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
So, like on level 3, we could make the first one item, all those in level 2 above us. And then these are the additional restrictions. And then we get to level 4, you can say everything that was a level 3 plus these items,
Yeah.
depending on how you want to write it. If you want to rewrite that thing that way. So we don't ever lose anything you've already started. You
may have already covered it with the way you wrote it.
I think the way level 4 reads, it pretty much captures a lot of
Everybody
things that was already. It
So-
just, it says it different, but where it says residents and visitors shall curtail indoor water use as possible.
So item number 7, would have to come down here.
So I do think though, bulk water, we've listed it above,
Good point.
title, level 4 red flag. I think, what bulk water is just not for, what do you want to do with bulk water? And this, where outdoor water is prohibited, outdoor landscaping prohibited, we're at that level now. What do we want to do with bulk water? Prohibited? Well, outside of permitted work,
I would say that bulk water be on a case by case basis as approved by the village public works or whatever, because
Can't shut a contractor down.
it's a loophole. Well, you can shut a contractor down if you don't have any water.
Yeah,
You want it to be for your families, not necessarily for
yeah.
that. But, it's a bit of a loophole if you don't shut it down. That if somebody has water bladders and they go fill it up and do what they want. So I would say that it needs to be curtailed.
So right now I've got bulk water reviewed upon case by case basis as determined by Public Works Director.
Sure. Quick question. We certainly have people who are adjacent to our community, dependent upon our community, who depend on bulk water. Like,
Yeah.
that's what they have at home.
That's the case.
So we don't want to restrict that. Do we have those people within the village as well?
Except for domestic use.
I think in the village limits, you either have a well or you're on public water. I don't know if village residents using bulk
No
water.
one's all someone's well runs dry and it takes them a month to get it operational.
They don't have a way of storing it.
Yeah, I don't know.
How do you?
I don't know how that's solved today.
In those,
Within
in
the
those,
village.
in those big translucent 250-gallon cage things in the back of the pickup truck, lots of people have those.
I don't know that a property in the village is dependent on that.
Right. So that's why I transitioned to, what about if somebody's well runs dry and it takes them 2, 3, 4 weeks?
So that's-
Operation.
That's why I think it's a case by case basis. And if you're well run dry, you got a good case to talk to the public works, say, hey, I need some bulk water.
Yeah, rather than the council,
Rather than.
which meets twice a
Yeah,
month.
it's gotta be immediate.
Let's go to the Public Works Director who's there 5 days a week.
People who are outside the village that are dependent on our bulk water, and assume that the public works director kind of knows who those people are. And can make.
We could make the decision, or we could refer them to someplace else to get it as well.
But I don't think a contractor who's gonna go wash out a culvert.
Yes, exactly. Get priority for bulk water.
Yeah.
So I think this is all great unless there's something else to add on level 4. Because I think it makes sense. We now have references to bulk water. We've put that reference in this section to capture that. We've limited irrigation to just certain parts of the village based on their zoning or Frontier Park. So that anything else is already captured in these restrictions on outdoor watering. The only other thing that we recommended was the last page was again references to fees, setting that by resolution. So unless there's something else on the water conservation, I think this is all good to take to council. The last thing, Mr. Chairman, it was just a suggestion is chapter 5, it's the oversized transport. And that was, I think from your conversation of the logging truck.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Page 12, F1, we have a resurfacing of the guilty of misdemeanor raise.
And let me go back just a second to the violations. Those people that violate, the fine is incidental. $50 is nothing, $500 is nothing, $1,000 is nothing for those people that want to violate. And so in my community in Austin where I used to live, we actually went down and said, you violate 3 times, we're gonna go put a flow restrictor in on your meter. And you violate it, if you can find a way to violate with the flow restrictor on it, we're gonna shut it off for 7 days. And put the flow restrictor in for 7 days, and then you'll have to pay the disconnect and reconnect fees as well to put this thing in and out. So it was, what we were running into in our community was that 7 houses used up all the water, so there was no water for the rest of us. So we were restricted to no outdoor watering. We had domestic water, but we were restricted to no outdoor watering because 7 houses took out the whole tank.
So right now, we've got a first violation as a warning, second violation is citation. Third violation, the village shall consider,
A high fine,
well,
there should be a higher fine or start to go after it, but then somewhere 3 or 4, you want to take something certain that's going to curtail their water use. That we are curtailing their water use. The flow restrictor, what it does, it says, you can take a shower. You'll be able to get water to take a shower, but if you got your dishwasher running when the shower's going, it's not gonna work.
so the way it's reading right above it is that each separate day of offense is another offense.
It's another offense.
So if the judge is saying, I'm gonna fine you $1,000 per offense, well, you were violation for 3 weeks, that's 15 days. Or 21 days. I think we have that
Okay,
for your second citation. I think what I'm trying to capture is your third violation went straight to like disconnect. If that's third violation,
we're finding that these flow restrictors are very effective and there's a lot of systems using it, what we found when we were researching this.
well, I think that's my question is rather than on a third offense, just another fine. A third offense is the village shall consider a flow restrictor or disconnect the service.
And then the next one was disconnect, and that was like for a period of 7 days or something. And then you would have to say that they have to pay, they gotta pay the village to put it in and take it out.
So up there, 1, the violation, 2, you might will be charged with a misdemeanor, not guilty of.
Yeah, he can get that. So I got parentheses about that. So it sounds like there's a third violation is a flow restrictor installed on the property. A fourth violation, the village shall consider disconnection of service.
And I hate to interrupt, but I can't stay later than 5:15, so that's a little less than 15 minutes.
Well, the last thing, Mr. Chairman, was just the oversized transfer. And there was a suggestion, we have a provision, if you are doing work that requires a traffic management plan, kind of like with the storage, it might require a flagman or cones. The idea was, give us a list of what streets you're using for this transport. And that makes a lot of sense, besides just saying a permit, what roads are you on? And that, if there was anything else that the community felt should be important for those types of, it's not necessarily transport, but it's heavy trucks on our roads. What is it we're trying to regulate or monitor? What should we put on that chapter?
Well, the discussion we had before was weight. And we know that we have asphalt roads, chip seal roads, and gravel roads. Could we assign weight limits to the category, the pavements that we have in our neighborhood, in our village?
I think some would argue that it's not really pavement, but
That's difficult to do, I think.
And regulate too.
And yeah, of course. It's, I think the traffic management plan is a critical step, and that we regulate them to some of the better quality roads, right, that are built for heavier traffic. I just don't know how you could determine the weight of a vehicle, especially those logging trucks, because they don't
Yep.
weigh until
Good
they
point.
get to the other end, so it's.
There was discussion on like gross